The weather is fine, so I hope that all our moods are fine, and we're here to learn all about well-being. I hope that today will be productive for you. I hope you'll get a lot out of it. Um, we're delighted with the speakers we have, and it should be a full day for you. We've built in well-being moments. We've also built in some breaks. So please take advantage of the breaks, and also I hope you'll learn something from the well-being moments. My name's Bryony Wickenden. I'm head of training and development for Seeker, and I also lead on the Fairness, Inclusion and Respect programme, and Inspiring Change is part of the Fairness, Inclusion and Respect programme. I'm not sure if my slides are moving on. I seem to have a technical hitch. I can't see them moving on, but I hope they are. I've sent out this morning a link to Menti. We're going to be using Menti. Menti is a polling app, and we just want to get some reactions from you, ask you some questions, see how you think well-being is being managed within the industry, and also understand your job roles, etc. As I say, at the moment, I can't move. I've got my screen is frozen, so I hope things have moved on. Sarah, do you want to just pop in?
Hi, Bryony. I can't see your slides moving, so I'll just share my screen with the slides. Bear with me.
Ah, they're now moving. I don't know whether I'm moving them.
Brilliant.
Or
That's perfect. Carry on, Bryony. Thank you.
Thank you. They are now moving. I'm sorry about that, folks. So just to give you a bit about the house rules, please get involved in the poll questions. As I say, it will help us to understand where you're all coming from, and if there are any issues that we haven't thought of. Use the Q&A. You should find at the bottom of your screen or on the side somewhere that there is a Q&A box. Please ask your questions through Q&A. We will be monitoring them, and we will try and answer them all. If we don't get to answer them all today, we will certainly respond when I send out a conference pack after the event. So we will try and cover them all, but I hope there's going to be lots of questions, and it might be a little bit challenging. Please share your feedback at the end. There will be a link to an online form. If you can do that, that will be very, very helpful. Again, we want to learn about your views on the conference. This is the first of 3 or 4. Some of you will have attended the face-to-face Inspiring Change event in the past. This is a sort of mini version of that, where we do a bit more of a deep dive into some of the issues that are raised there. We will be sharing the slides after the event, and as I say, we will be putting together a pack. So that's that. If you're having problems, Sarah's your contact. Unfortunately, I'm doing so many other bits and pieces, I can't be your contact. So if you do have any problems, either leave the comment in the Q&A or email Sarah directly. All right, we're ready for the first Menti question. If you have a phone and you haven't already downloaded the app, or if you want to do it on your laptop or computer, go to menti.com and enter the Menti code, which is, I'm going to have to move something on your screen. And you need to answer the question, very simple, you should all know the answer to this. What is your job title? So if you can all type in now, what is your job title? That would be great. And we should see who we've got in the room with us. I hope there's some people coming in there now. Right. There we go, beginning to get some responses. Procurement directors, wellbeing managers, consultants, HR support, office managers, HR advisors, directors, business development, ops managers, communications managers. Great, it's looking good. It's looking good. Compensation managers, coaches, consultants, temporary works design engineer. Fantastic. Great. However, it won't come as any surprise that the vast majority are management or office-based roles by the looks of it. And today is just as much about those people that are working on our sites. And we really need to think how we can communicate the messages that we get today and messages from us in the future down to those people that are operating on the sites. So if you've got any ideas about that during the day, type them in. Make a point of sharing with us what you do. I am putting together some best practice videos, and if you've got a good story to tell, let me know. Thanks. Right, we'll move on to the next question, which is, does your organization already have a wellbeing strategy? And one hopes that if you have got a wellbeing strategy, you would know. Oh, but there is somebody who doesn't know. So that's going back to the communication issue. If you don't know, possibly you should know. Fair number haven't. Any more responses coming in? Any more don't knows? 31. Right. Okay, well, we hope that those that have got a wellbeing strategy will go back and have a look at it after today. Those that haven't will learn something about what should be in a wellbeing strategy, and those who don't know maybe need to go and find out and have words with those people that may or may not have created them. Certainly start with the senior management team, I would think. So great, lovely. Looks like we can all use Menti. That's excellent. So we'll move on. My screen's not sharing again. There we go, from current slide. Right, okay. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Alistair Reisner, who is going to introduce, no, I'm not, I beg your pardon. I'm going to introduce Rachel Suff. We're delighted to have Rachel join us today. She's an expert in her field. She has written the CIPD's or authored the CIPD's report on wellbeing in the workplace. Obviously, CIPD is the professional body for HR and therefore covers all sectors of industry. So it's not just looking at construction, but I always think that we can learn something from other sectors of the industry. So there we go. Over to you, Sarah, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Bryony. And you can see there, we're always sometimes at the mercy slightly of IT with my slides jumping around as well. But I'm delighted to be here and join this conference. So hi, everybody. So as Bryony said, I work at the CIPD, which is the professional body for HR and people development. I'll take you through a couple of slides about us now. But in terms of my role, I work in the public policy team. I lead on health and wellbeing, and my role is mainly external facing, so influencing government and working with other external organisations to really try and influence policy and practice in the workplace around health and wellbeing. And at the CIPD, we try and do that in a really practical way because we have nearly 160,000 members across the world, but mainly in the UK. And we aim to change workplace practice and improve health and wellbeing in the workplace, in those workplaces. And we've got lots of practical resources, research and so on. And I'll come on to talk about some of those which are on our website. So moving on, this is our worldwide community of people professionals. So you can see where we are based across the world, but mainly in the UK, as I said. And then the next slide, I wanted to show you this one, a little bit more about us, but particularly draw your attention to the bubble on the right-hand side, which shows what our purpose is. And that's to champion better work and working lives. And we take that purpose very seriously at the CIPD. It runs through everything that we do, and health and well-being is at the heart of that purpose, because we're not going to achieve better lives for people at work if their health and well-being isn't looked after and enhanced as well. So what am I going to cover today? So I'm setting the scene really with this session, and I've posed my session in terms of 4 questions. Are we fostering healthy workplaces for health and wellbeing that are supported by good people management practices? What impact has the pandemic had on people's health and wellbeing and employer practices as well? Have they stepped up? What are the main challenges for people's wellbeing, and what action is needed to rise to those challenges? And then finally, what role do line managers play in supporting good wellbeing, and how are they supported? Are they supported enough or in the right way? And to answer those questions, I'm going to draw on some findings from our annual Health and Wellbeing at Work survey report, which you can see on the right-hand side. We published it quite recently. It's the 21st edition, so it's been going for over 2 decades. And so we've really built up a lot of trend data in terms of how organisations have been supporting people, what policies, practices, etc. they've got in place over the past 20 years. And it's through the eyes of HR professionals in the main. 700 odd organisations, nearly 3 million employees covered collectively. So a really insightful window on the world of work and health and wellbeing. Now, to give an overview, first of all, this is my first slide showing some of the findings. And we know over the last few years that more and more organisations are trying to put measures in place so that they take a holistic approach to supporting people's health and wellbeing. There's a growing recognition that they have responsibility for improving health and wellbeing. And on the right-hand side, before I run through the main dimensions of wellbeing, which is shown with the bullets, we have, first of all, which I need to mention, the CIPD wellbeing model, because that shows that whatever your program, whatever your initiatives around health and wellbeing in your workplace, they need to be based on the key foundations of having a supportive culture, effective leadership, and also strong people management practices. People need to be managed well and supportively if you're going to bring those health and wellbeing policies to life. There's no point spending a lot of money on an expensive initiative for health and wellbeing, or having a fantastic policy if it isn't brought to life and embedded in real, practical, tangible ways across the organisation, supported by a culture where people can talk about health issues, raise concerns, get support, and access any changes that they might need to support their health at work. So, going down the bullet points, this reflects how organisations have been attempting to take that holistic approach, because having a holistic approach recognises that our health and our well-being at work are affected by, touched and affected by a whole range of different dimensions, and these show the main ones in the CIPD model. So at the top, we've got good mental health. So 90% of organizations say that their program or strategy focuses on providing good mental health. Then good work, so good working conditions, job design, amount of work you've got to do, and so on. So 3/4 almost focus on that. Collective social relationships, so important for our work-life balance, that peer support that we can access at work. And then good physical health, obviously very important, and the sort of values and principles at work. Personal growth, so things like training, coaching, mentoring. So we're going down the scale here. Good lifestyle choices, that can be things like exercise, good diet, stop smoking support. Bottom of the list, as you can see, is financial well-being. A poor relation in terms of most organizations' health and wellbeing programs, and very important though, because if you've got many worries, they can really add to our level of stress and so on. Now, just moving on to the impact of COVID-19. We have 18 months now into this global pandemic. Of course, the threat to people's physical health was very immediate, very obvious last year, but it very quickly became apparent that the challenges to people's mental health were very real as well. And that's become even more obvious as we've gone on through this pandemic. And that concern for people's mental health came through very strongly in the survey. And you can see here that over 2/5 at the top of the slide, over 2/5 of HR were extremely concerned about the impact of the pandemic on people's mental health at work, and then a further 2/5 moderately concerned. So that's the vast majority of our HR professionals concerned. And the second part of the slide shows some results from one of the surveys that we've carried out of employees, because we've been regularly asking workers, how have they been experiencing the pandemic? How has it affected them? How has it affected their health, their relationship with work, and so on? And this is the result of just one of the questions. And we asked, as a result of the COVID-19 lockdown, are the following better or worse off for you? And it shows the results in terms of their physical health, mental health, financial security, and their social connections at work. First of all, you can see the grey shaded area on the right-hand side, between 45 and 52% reported that there'd been no change. And that's actually quite encouraging, considering the many challenges that so many people have been experiencing. So to not have any real change over those 4 dimensions of our health and well-being is quite good. But at the same time, almost the same proportion said that all those dimensions felt worse off. And if you look at the mental health finding, because 45% said that their mental health was worse off since the pandemic, which isn't surprising, I think to many of us. Now, just because people said that their mental health was worse off, just to put this into context, that doesn't mean that everybody who reported that has now got a mental health condition that's been diagnosed. Our mental health fluctuates across a very broad spectrum. It can't be great or even good all the time. But at the same time, it does show that the challenges to many people's mental health are very real, and some will have potentially developed symptoms of a mental health condition. And that's come out in a lot of different pieces of research. Not long ago, the ONS, Official Government Statistics Agency, produced large-scale findings showing that the number of adults experiencing symptoms of depression since the pandemic has doubled compared to pre-pandemic. And I know that the CITB, the Construction Industry Training Board, has some research showing that nearly all construction workers have experienced stress in the last year. So a lot of findings around mental health to be aware of, and some groups in particular will have experienced more challenges, and employers need to be aware. So, for example, if somebody had a pre-existing mental health condition, also younger adults, there's a lot of concern for the mental health. I'm sure you'll have seen the mental health of younger adults, and they're experiencing worse risk of unemployment as well. And those official statistics showed that young adults are 3 times more likely than others to be experiencing some form of depression. So employers would be mindful to be aware of some of these heightened risks for some groups without making assumptions about any particular individual. But also, as well as providing really good access to mental health support and so on, it would pay to be mindful of your wider employment and recruitment practices and so on in terms of people's mental well-being. So especially in the case of young people, for example, if people are starting a new job, and this would go for anyone, but young people in particular, if they're coming into the industry new, they've never been on a construction site or worked or in an office either, in any of your roles, then that induction process, making sure people feel confident to settle in and take up their role, really, really important. But moving on. So I've said that there's a lot of concern coming through in our survey for people's health and well-being. What's encouraging as well, that most organisations in our survey have been acting on that concern as well and taking additional measures to support people's health and well-being. And you can see on this graph in descending order the kind of steps that organisations have been taking. And top of the table is more focus on looking after people's mental health. And then also second down is more support tailored to meet individuals' needs and concerns, like flexible working. And I think that's really important because it's recognising that everybody is impacted differently by this pandemic in terms of physical health, but also crucially their mental health. And everybody's needs will be different. And so recognising that and trying to support people in as bespoke a way as possible is really important. Okay, so really good that many organisations are concerned and acting on that concern for people's mental health. But you can see here that when we asked organisations, has your organisation been effective at identifying and managing the mental health risks? Just over half said yes, they strongly agreed. Quite a lot, almost 3 in 10, neither agreed or disagreed, so quite ambivalent. And then nearly 20% disagreed. So I think we have to address that if we want to really improve how the workplace is supporting people's mental health. And the research does suggest a number of areas where many organisations could focus more attention to improve health and well-being for people. I think first of all, there's signs that more organisations anyway, need to adopt a more systematic and strategic approach to identifying and managing those main risks to people's health, both physical and psychological. And I was interested to see the result from the Menti question that Bryony rang about, does your organisation have a strategy or not? I mean, it's a really good starting place to have that systematic, strategic approach to health and well-being. So I could see a lot their organisation did, but it'd be good if every organisation developed a strategy around health and well-being, because then you can really look at how can you embed it across the organisation. And also more action, I think, is needed to try and prevent ill health. So really pleased that this title of the conference is around prevention, because really that prevention is so crucial to encouraging early intervention and the organisation being able to help individuals who have got mental health issues or other health concerns as well, and really putting in place support and so on, and changes at work as well to stop those issues escalating. And that would mean, for example, in terms of mental health, doing things like carrying out a stress risk assessment. So you are methodically looking at what are the particular risks to that team, to that individual. And the HSC have got great, practical, easy to use tools to help you do that. I'm going to move on now. Related to what I've just talked about is the need for organisations to be more aware as well of what are the underlying factors in your organisation that are influencing people's health and well-being and driving not just health and well-being but behaviour as well around health and well-being. You know, you really do need to look deep as an organisation to see what is happening and what's influencing stress, for example. With this slide as an example, this shows what are the most common causes of stress at work amongst those organisations we surveyed. And you can see here that the top cause is workloads and volumes of work, and manageable ones. This has been the case every year. It's always by far the biggest cause of stress. And this means that organisations really need to think about fundamental factors that's driving that finding, such as allocation of work, job design, deadlines, targets, objectives. Are they realistic, achievable, and so on? You've got to really break that down. And then secondly, moving on now to the theme for the rest of my presentation, really, which is about the role that line managers play. We can see here that management style is considered the second main cause of stress at work. And I mean, line managers play such an integral role in terms of supporting good health and well-being amongst their teams. And this finding shows how that role can go either way in terms of the impact on people's health and well-being, because here you see that management style is having a detrimental impact. And it shows that if line managers aren't supported, guided, trained, capable and confident in their role for managing people and supporting their well-being as well, then the impact can be adverse for people's health and well-being. And we don't mean in any sense that line managers have got a medical role to play. Far from it. They need to know where the line lies, where they need to refer to more expert sources of help. But they do need to be in a position where they're building trust, a relationship based on trust with their team, where an individual can feel they have a safe environment to have a genuine conversation, to raise concerns that they might have. And the line manager as well needs to know what available support there is in the organisation and outside the organisation as well. Not every organisation does have an occupational health department or access to an employee assistance programme, but there are really good external links and support pathways as well. And a number of charities in the UK have excellent helplines with really qualified people at the other end who can provide help and so on. So there's a big role there for line managers. Now, we know as well that good people management, I've already mentioned how we see it as key to effective wellbeing support at the CIPD, but what we see in our survey over the last few years is that there isn't enough investment in terms of making sure that line managers can live up to that challenge and be a force for good in terms of people's well-being. There's so much responsibility on line managers, and I think over the last 18 months, I think many of you will agree that their responsibility has only increased. Very often, especially if people have been working at home, they are the only link that many people might have between themselves and the organisation. So they act as a kind of gateway for the policies and the support that might be available to people if they need it in terms of health and wellbeing. Also, at the same time, line managers are people like ourselves, and they will have been experiencing many of the same challenges and pressures inside work and outside work as we have. We also know from research at the CIPD that they're very often the squeezed middle. They have this big responsibility for managing people, but also they are responsible for delivering on operational priorities, and those will only have increased over the last 18 months as their business continues to respond to COVID-19. So they really do have a big role to play. But if we look just a bit more closely in terms of mental health, how that gap is really there in terms of the investment needed, but not always given. And you can see the result of it then. So at the top, we can see that 43% of organisations have trained managers to support staff with mental ill health. Now that figure has actually gone down from last year. Last year it was about 51%. So a lot of managers out there who haven't been trained, educated around stress, mental health issues. So you can see that from the next two findings, it's not surprising that there's not a lot of confidence in how confident managers are to have sensitive personal conversations with people, to discuss health and wellbeing concerns, and to do that crucial referral to more qualified expert sources of help. Just 38% think that managers are capable in that area. And then even less, the third finding, 31% say that managers are confident to spot the early warning signs of mental ill health. And if you know your team, you know, if you can spot, be alert to changes in behaviour and performance and so on that might indicate that somebody isn't coping very well. And it's really important that a manager is able to very sensitively and appropriately just open up the conversation with real empathy and compassion and create that safe space. And then on the right-hand side, just another finding, again, from our employee research, we asked people, since the onset of COVID-19, has your employer or line manager checked on your health and wellbeing? Now, this was towards the end of last year, so we're many months into the global health pandemic. 2/3 of people told us, yes, my manager or employers checked on my health and wellbeing, but a third said no. So to think that nobody's asked about your health and wellbeing, and this was a wide-scale survey, that is disappointing. You'd have expected that somebody would have asked how you were. So room for improvement, I think. But then, on a positive note, just to end my presentation, there were findings in the survey as well that give us real grounds for optimism. We have been sending out a very strong message for the past few years at the CIPD about the importance of senior leaders taking health and wellbeing seriously. Nothing will be prioritised in an organisation if the senior leadership team and the board treat it as a priority. We know that, and it would go for any initiative or any aspect of the organisation. Health and wellbeing is no exception. And senior leaders make a difference in a whole number of different ways, as we know. They will have the defining influence on the culture. They will make sure that the investment is there, not just in terms of funding for health and wellbeing initiatives and so on, but in terms of management time and so on. What we can see here is that this survey this year showed that it's really jumped, that the number of our survey respondents who said that employee wellbeing is on senior leaders' agendas has really gone up. We've got the last 4 years here shown, and at the top you can see that this year 75% said yes, it's on senior leaders' agenda. which is great. We need to make sure it stays there as well. And then also the second finding shows that line managers are increasingly buying into the importance of well-being. So that is a positive as well. I leave it there just to say that you can download the report from our website, and really happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Well, can I take this opportunity to thank you, Rachel? I'm Alistair Reisner. I'm Chief Executive of the Civil Engineering Contractors Association. And so I'm sort of managing the Q&A in response to this. So first, can I thank you for taking the time to run us through your presentation? I think anyone who's on this call will have been reflecting on that and sort of what you've said and how it feels in relation to experience in their own organisation. Now, we do have a Q&A function, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen. If you do have any questions for Rachel, we are a bit pressed on time, so I think we would ask if you could be quick and submit any questions that you do have. But I know that we have had a question come in over that, which I wanted to ask you about the change during COVID. The question is, would that question have picked up respondents' starting position, i.e. if they were already in a financial security position that was poor, would it pick up that had worsened?
No, I don't think so necessarily in that particular questions, because we didn't ask how you measured your health, your financial security well-being before the pandemic. We really did just ask respondents, do you think it's worsened since? So no, it wouldn't quite pick up that nuance.
Excellent. And I've got one that's come in over the Q&A. So, and this is probably the million-dollar question. What can we do to improve employees' management of workload volume?
What can we do to improve?
The employees' management of their workload volume. We see that as the biggest issue about the volume of workload. I'm sure we all experience that. So what can we do to best address that? Yeah,
we know that work has become more intense, and we can see it in a whole number of ways. We could see it in that slide, couldn't we? The biggest cause of stress. And I think it's the amount of work, but the work intensity and the pace of it as well is what we're seeing coming through. And I think it has to be addressed at different levels in an organisation. It has to be addressed at the top, and it has to be in job design and so on. And when you're looking at the real risk factors for stress and so on, you have to address job design and the amount of work. But there has to be a conversation as well, and awareness around line managers, because it is line managers that will be allocating that work. They'll be setting the deadlines. They'll be setting targets, performance objectives as well. And it can be quite hard for an individual on their own to address that. But that is why you need to be able to have that conversation with your line manager and have an honest conversation that, you know, these deadlines, this workload is bringing stress to bear. I mean, there are a lot of other factors that cause potentially stress as well, but you know, that line manager, because they don't just have a role for health and well-being in terms of conversations, mental health. You know, you've got to look at the underlying factors, and it's all very well offering great support and having a lovely policy, but if people are just overwhelmed with work and it's not realistic, there has to be that conversation.
Now, we are very pressed for time, so I'm going to take one question. It's very, unfortunately, I think we'll have to ask for quite a short answer on it, but what can you do if your line management and senior management refuse to address these issues, particularly around well-being? What are the options available to an employee? Well,
it's really difficult, isn't it? What can you do as an individual? I think that's why we really stress with our model of well-being that you've got to have a leadership and a senior management that are supportive, that take it seriously. And I think as an individual, you don't have a lot of control then really within that organisation. And if there is no will to really prioritise health and well-being as one single individual, I think it's very, very, very difficult, to be honest. What are the options open to you? You can try and approach some managers or people with influence in the organisation where, you know, there could be pockets of individuals who do want to sort of make a difference, because I think in most organisations there is an awareness around health and well-being, and you know, some, it depends what level of influence you've got on the organisation as well, but it's really difficult.
Thank you, Rachel. Now, unfortunately, that is because otherwise we'll be eating into other people's time. I am going to move us on. So thank you so much for taking the time out. For those of you who have questions that we haven't had a chance to ask, we will try and pick them up either through the Q&A function or offline. So now I'd like to move on. Could we move the slides on? I think we have our next Menti question. So those of you who do have the ability to access Menti, our next question is, what are some of the big risks to workers' health and well-being within the industry at the moment? So as I say, if you do have the ability to get access to Menti, if you could go there and fill your views in relation to those challenges. But while you're doing that, I'm going to also introduce our next panel. So our facilitator for the panel is Glenn Ridgway. And Glenn is going to be speaking with Fiona King of HS2, Sophia Lowes of Cancer Research UK, Peter Crosland, who works with me at Seeker, and Matthew Stafford-Clark of MMB Workplace Education. So I'm going to say no more. Glenn, I'm going to pass across to you.
Thank you. Again, just very quick, 2 minutes on me. Glenn Ridgway. I am a founder of Workplace Wellbeing Academy, and we look to sort of, well, we like to think we do all things workplace wellbeing, everything from management training to strategy design, strategy development and implementation, through to designing healthy work wellbeing spaces, if you like. So that's who we are, but that's not what I'm here today to talk about. I think looking at the feedback that we're getting from Menti, I'm going to introduce individual panelists quickly, and each panelist will have 5 minutes to explain who they are, what their role is in wellbeing, and then we will come back and we will answer some of these, or respond to some of the risks that people are coming up with. So if I can ask Fiona to come on screen first. Fiona is the Wellbeing Manager for HS2. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong, and I will say no more than that and just let you introduce yourself, Fiona, and crack on from there.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today as well. Sorry, frog in the throat, that doesn't sound good. Anyway, so I'm Fiona King. I'm Head of Occupational Health and Wellbeing at HS2. So I've been with the organisation coming up to nearly 5 years now. And as you know, HS2 is a brand new low carbon high speed railway, which is going to be critical to supporting UK economic growth and tackling climate change. So it's, as you know, a very big project that's ongoing at the moment with lots of health and well-being challenges, which, you know, makes it daunting but exciting at the same time, because I think we've a real opportunity to try and you know, to gather good evidence, to start to see what really works in the health and well-being space, and to be able to pass on that learning to others within the industry. I see that as critical as our role at HS2. And you know, when I'm looking at, you know, I've kind of almost got two hats on me when I'm working at HS2. I'm obviously looking after our own health HS2 staff and employees and what do they need from a health and wellbeing perspective, but also then working really closely with all of the health and wellbeing teams working across the supply chain in how do we actually, as a project, really manage health and wellbeing. And I think, I suppose if I look first at HS2 and internal to ourselves, where, you know, our risks are probably no different to anyone else's risks here today. You know, they're focusing around what I call the 4 pillars of well-being: financial, physical, social, and mental well-being. And actually, I always say that you can't just focus on one in isolation. You need to make sure that you're looking at all 4 at the same time, because one influences the other. And whilst one might feel worse at a stage, actually you have to think about the 4 together to really make an impactful change within the business. And I think it's more looking at how do we not react the whole time to risks that come around health? How are we more proactive? So a lot of what Rachel said in her earlier presentation really resonated with me as well, because it's about the support you provide, but it's about proactive support. And it's not just having an EAP service or a mental health first aid network. It has to be broader than that. And I think often we can be guilty of just trying to feel that we have to fix individuals when we need to be looking broader to how do we support teams, the line managers, and what's the organisation doing around it as well, because we as an organisation, we have responsibilities with this as well. I think if there was one learning I've had over the past year is the importance of gathering the data to really understand what people perceive the risks to be within their organisations as well. What do they see the health and wellbeing risks at that time? Because what you can then do is put in place effective support, both proactive and preventative support to support those health risks. And I mean, a lot of our health risks, which again are probably no different to a lot of people on the call, have been really around, particularly in the past year, looking at the mental health and looking at the physical health. So the fact that, you know, people have more increased levels of anxiety. But what that doesn't mean is that everyone is being diagnosed with anxiety. They have anxiety because of the impact COVID is having on all the aspects of their well-being. And then looking at, you know, how do we support individuals? How do we help give people a safe space so they can get the support, but also speak up about their anxieties, particularly as we start now. And I think this is one of the other health and wellbeing risks, as we start to move into different ways of working, different models. So, you know, lots of talk about hybrid models, but with that, that's going to bring new health and risks. And, you know, looking at some of the feedback that you provided here in the Mentimeter, you know, all of those are really relevant to well-being, and they don't just fit in one bucket. And I think the other thing as well, looking at health and well risks across construction, is that it will vary in offices to being on the site as well. And we need to be really cognizant of that. What will work well in an office may not work well on site. And that's where it's so important that we're listening to what people are telling us, what they're foreseeing some of the risks are, because often people can see it quicker than sometimes leaders do, because you're trying to tackle an issue. And I think we have to be thinking about, you know, what we do know is that long COVID is there. How do we support workers to be able to continue to work? And if they're not able to work, how are we able to make those adjustments that enables them to be able to return back to the workplace? I think we need to be thinking about the fact that we'll have individuals with with underlying health conditions that now may be waiting for treatment, and that's going to have an impact on maybe their ability to work. So again, it's thinking about how do we support them to remain in the workplace as well. And then it's thinking about, I think an area that's probably quite hard at the moment is around that financial well-being support. How do we support an industry around that financial security? Because if you don't have financial security, we know people's mental health and physical health will suffer. So we need to think about that collectively. And I don't think there's one big answer out there at the moment, but it's certainly a conversation that's happening wider in the business. And I think collectively, look, and we've now, you know, as HS2 as a collective, are sat down and go, right, we're doing a lot of really good stuff in helping individuals, but actually what we need to now get to is how do we support teams and how do we support organizations? So we're thinking about these health and health and wellbeing risks, as you've all, you know, set out there around the workload, around burnout, which is, you know, a new occupational phenomenon and something that we probably have seen with a lot, probably, if we were to look back over projects in the past. So how are we actually starting to tackle that? So we're starting to focus more on teams and the organization, and how do we actually make those changes that are going to be lasting? So I think probably my 5 minutes is up there, Glenn. I haven't had today the nod, but you know, there's so much to cover in health and wellbeing risks. But I think the risks, you know, musculoskeletal burnout, mental health, financial, they're all still the same. But what's different is it's the environment we're working in now, and we need to be creating an environment where we're thinking about designing out these health and well-being risks, but actually how do we support, promote and sustain it into the future? And we also take the learnings that we've collected loads of in the past year to make those changes. But we can't take a long time about doing it. We need to kind of crack on with it as well. So back to you, Glenn.
Thank you. When I come back to you, I'll be asking a question which I think Bryony mentioned earlier on, is how do we actually take this stuff to the man on the end of the person on the end of a shovel, and how you at HS2 in your role can maybe help to influence that. So when I come back to you, I'll be asking that question. But first, before I get that, I want to introduce Sophia Lowes, who is the Health Information Manager at Cancer Research UK. I will let Sophia introduce, take it beyond there and explain her role and why she's here today. So Sophia can come onto video.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. So I'm a Health Information Manager at Cancer Research UK, and my role specialises in the evidence and information about the prevention and early diagnosis of cancer. And hopefully you've all heard of Cancer Research UK. We're the world's leading independent cancer charity that's dedicated to saving lives through research, influence, and also information. Now, although cancer survival in the UK has doubled over the last 40 years, more people today are being diagnosed with cancer than ever before. And now we know that today 1 in 2 people in the UK born after 1960 will be diagnosed with cancer during their lifetime. But sadly, only around half of those diagnosed will survive for 10 years or more. Now, according to research, construction workers are more likely to be diagnosed with cancer and are less likely to survive than the general population. And there are several reasons for this. So one of it is lots of construction workers work outdoors, where they are more likely to be overexposed to UV rays from the sun. And this gives them a higher risk of developing and dying from melanoma skin cancer. Construction workers are also twice as likely to smoke every day compared to the national average. And I'm sure you all know about the health risks of smoking. It's the biggest cause of cancer in the world and is linked to at least 15 different types of cancer. And because more people are smoking in the construction industry, they will therefore be at increased risk of smoking-related cancers. A quarter of construction workers drink above the government guidelines, and this is again a higher proportion than the national average. Drinking alcohol is linked to 7 different types of cancer, including bowel cancer and mouth cancer. Rates of cancer are also higher in more deprived groups, and over half of workers in construction are from these more deprived groups. And our research into health inequalities has estimated that there's around 20,000 extra cancer cases each year in more deprived areas of the UK. And finally, the construction industry is predominantly male, and men are more likely to be diagnosed at a later stage when cancer is harder to treat. But importantly, these increased risks aren't inevitable, and we can make a change. So in the UK, around 4 in 10 cases of cancer could be prevented, and Cancer Research UK is working to raise the construction industry's awareness of these preventable cancer risk factors to help workers stack the odds in their favour. We have a workplace health programme which has worked with a wide variety of industries, including the construction industry, and we tailor that programme to suit each workforce. And we've seen hugely positive results from this. Last year, we reached over 100,000 people. And we're just really passionate about supporting employees to live longer, healthier lives through by doing activity and communication focusing on the prevention and early diagnosis of cancer. From our work, we've seen increased awareness of these risk factors, improved education on the signs and symptoms of cancer, and ultimately empowered employees to help beat cancer and reduce their own risk. That's it from me. But happy to pass back to you, Glenn.
Thank you, Sophia. And again, I was, we'll come back to it. I was thinking, one of the questions I was thinking, unless something else comes up, is there, obviously cancer has a huge emotional impact on not only the people with the cancer, but the people around them. So is there anything that that employers can do to help support people through that process? So I'll come back and, yeah, like I say, we'll maybe have a conversation around that. So I'm now going to introduce Peter. Peter is the National Civil Engineering Director of SEEKA, and he's got lots of other bits and pieces that he does, including Vice Chair of the ICE Health and Safety Expert Panel, etc. So he's been around a while, but he knows his stuff. So I'm going to say no more than that and pass over to Peter himself.
Well, thank you, Glenn, and good morning, everybody. I can hope I can just live up to that introduction. As Glenn says, I'm the National Civil Engineering Director with SEEKA, and I do wear a number of other hats. So what I might be saying could be seem a little bit scattergun, but it is because I do sit on a number of panels and groups. And one in particular one is, well, through SEEKA, one of my roles is to sit on CONIAC, which is as you hopefully you'll all know, is the Construction Industry Advisory Committee, which is a tripartite arrangement. With obviously the first one is HSE as the regulator, the unions, including GMB and Unite, and thirdly, industry, of which obviously we are part of. And as part of CONIAC's or HSE's strategy and forward look, it really hasn't changed much over the years. They're still concentrating on all things respiratory. And dare I say, could silica be the next asbestos? There've been reports been published by BNC a couple of years ago, which are very informative around that topic area. Huge issues potentially. Obviously, mental health and work-related stress is how we badge it within the groups, and obviously musculoskeletal disorders. So, that's what the regulator thinks are the main risks, and who would argue? Just as a point of interest, maybe, or a point of information, CONIAC has recently been reconstituted, and there's now a strong relationship with the CLC co-vice chairs of Sarah Jardine, who's the chief inspector of HSE, and Dylan Roberts from CLC and Skanska. What I would mention as well is the work that we do with the Health and Construction Leadership Group, which was set up as a direct response to a challenge from HSE and CONIAC for industry to have its say on all things health. So that was really where the focus was coming, and the suggestion is in the title, Health in Construction Leadership Group. And similarly, their key focus subgroups are respiratory, mental health, and stress, and communication, which we'll probably touch on again later. So looking at the big question, what are the big risks to workers' health and wellbeing within the industry at the moment? Certainly been touched on by some of the responses in Mentimeter, and when we're looking at, I noticed that there was a number of comments about isolation, so in particular relation to sites. Obviously, we have the CLC site operating procedures, which I think has worked well, but those are for the well-run sites. And where you have the sites which are more remote, only 2, 3, 4 people working, then who provides that support? Who provides support to them? And I think that's really need to look at. Again, looking at the office, return to work. Is also a key issue. We know, and having a meeting the other day where there was a fantastic suggestion of the host company was taking videos and photographs of where people who hadn't worked, they hadn't even met their bosses, so they were anxious about returning to work. So there was a very nice take up on how to introduce the staff to the organisation. And that was Sir Robert McAlpine. So if we want some good practice, we can go there. I think we all know about Zoom burnout, jumping from Zoom to Skype to MS Teams. But I do think we have inadvertently created an on-demand 24/7 culture that does increase those day pressures. But what I wanted to focus on very quickly was the key risk for me is that and it's a bit of an anti-goal really, if we don't respond to the question on the tin, i.e., how do we prevent ill health and poor wellbeing in the first place? So you know, there's been a huge numbers of initiatives, largely aimed at sort of the person at the end of the shovel, because that's in effect what the statistics are telling us to look at. But what we need to do is shift the emphasis, and certainly Rachel touched on it, and Fiona as well, that we need to look at the bigger picture so that no one is put under undue pressure in the first place. So one way of changing this was to look at from the top, both at the management level and at the project level. There could be you know, a number of initiatives that try to address the disconnect really between what should happen, you know, in providing that protection to all workers, to actually what does happen. And there are some initiatives that have been out in the workplace for a while now. Project 13, for instance, through its collaborative entrepreneurial approach rather than the traditional hierarchical and contractual methods. And then there's also recently the construction playbook, which really could be a game changer if it was taken on board by a whole range of clients and providers, rather than just being a government initiative. So as part of a quick fix solution, just a thought, you know, we all, at the start of a project, we all say, well, how quickly can we finish this project? How cheaply can we do it? So it's that old race to the bottom. So simple, I think, is an immediate question to raise for every project is, how can we deliver this project in a way that no one is made ill by their work? And what really we're talking about is a health, safety and wellbeing strategy right at the outset of the project. So to set your goals and anti-goals, set your strategic risks, set your procurement strategy, set a clear communication strategy, because this is absolutely vital. The comms must be clear, the two-way and non-judgmental. Obviously leadership, which has been touched on previously, and operational requirements. You know, let's not forget that the design and the build phases, we also have the maintenance and operations aspects to look at the risks as well. So by you know, my feeling is that if we get that holistic approach right, then I think we are making inroads into shifting, you know, what we probably haven't done very well as an industry in the past.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Sorry, carry on. Sorry, carry on.
No, so that's no, thank you. That's me done.
I was one of the comments I saw in the Menti was the vast majority of people on site work for small organisations. So how do we support and help them as organisations like Seeker, as principal contractors or clients, to be able to do this stuff? I hear what you're saying around the management side of things and the leadership, and that, and I absolutely agree. But we need to be able to support those smaller organisations in a way that they get that benefit as well. So, but again, I will revisit that when we come back to the main question and answers. But first, I want to introduce Matt Stafford, Clark. No, Clack, sorry. Matt is, it says here, is digital and retirement education leader for MMB Workplace Education. Matt is here today to talk about, we saw earlier on in Rachel's talk that financial well-being is very low on the priority list. So Matt is going to hopefully explain to us why it should be higher.
Absolutely.
There you go. Pass over to Matt.
Thanks, Glenn. So hi, everybody. As Glenn said there, I'm the retirement and digital education leader for Mercer Marsh Benefits Workplace Education. So just to give you background on that, the Workplace Education team, we're a specialist consultancy and delivery team within Mercer Marsh Benefits, and we focus on providing education and wellbeing programs for clients of all sizes and across all industries. Core to our role as educators, especially when we're talking to people about financial well-being, is that we're honest and impartial teachers. What we're trying to do is empower individuals to improve their financial well-being, improve their understanding, improve their capability, and give them the tools to manage their finances themselves. So that informs our perspective on why financial well-being is important and why organisations need to address it as a risk. So, reflecting on our own experience of being ill, it's obvious that being below par physically is going to have an impact on our work performance. And as you can see from the slide, financial stresses just exaggerate all of those poor effects. And while it's obvious for physical issues, Less obvious, but no less damaging, is the impact of financial well-being issues. And beyond this stress and sickness link that we can see here, we can talk confidently about distraction, disengagement, presenteeism, absenteeism, even criminality as potential negative outcomes of individuals having poor financial well-being. So when we look at the risk of a distracted employee on a construction site, maybe distracted by thinking about an unpaid bill, it's obvious what the risk is. But we can expand that risk to look at your reputation, your insurance premiums, relationships with subcontractors, your workforce. A distracted or disengaged employee making a mistake on payroll, making a mistake on billing. All of these things can have a real impact on you as a business. And when we look at how widespread these issues are, we can see some concerning figures. So the first 9 boxes here predate COVID, but just to pick up a couple there, 94% of UK workers were affected by money worries, 52% had borrowed to meet basic needs. And when we look at the final 3 boxes, these are since COVID, during COVID on lockdown. And these should be of concern to everyone because they affect everyone. And if you as an organization don't know how exposed your organization is, how exposed your workforce is, you can't respond appropriately and you can't address the risk. Now, pardon me. The issue you have with financial well-being, the issue we all have with financial well-being, is that humans aren't built to be good with money. It runs counter to a lot of our natural instincts to think short-term, to seek gratification. And when you're dealing with decisions that need to be taken with a result that's months, years, decades in the future, it's very hard for people to naturally make the right decision. And we can use it as an illustration, the left brain creative, right brain logical model. It's not neurological fact, but it's useful here. And what we try and do as educators is get people to engage both sides of the brain appropriately for the decision that's facing them. Now, when we're talking with individuals, we try to give them a framework to understand their financial well-being and what they're trying to achieve. And we talk about these 4 pillars: control over day-to-day spending, capacity to absorb a financial shock, freedom to choose how you spend your money and to make plans for the future, and being on track for your future financial goals. And being in a position where you can confidently say, yes, I have all of this, that puts the individual in an extremely strong position, both for their present and for their future. Now, there are a myriad of financial wellbeing solutions out there and financial wellbeing tools and financial wellbeing support. And we can look at things like workplace loans, you could look at education programs, you can look at money management apps. But these are all tools, and particularly in this industry, you'll understand that a tool without training can be counterproductive and even dangerous to the individual. So we believe education is fundamental to helping both the individual improve their financial well-being, but also for the organization to address that financial well-being risk. Now, the theme of this conference is that prevention is better than cure, and that's abundantly true of financial well-being. Small interventions made early can give individuals the skills, the understanding, the platform to lock in improvements to their financial situation. Again, not just now, but for the future, and that'll stay with them for the rest of their lives. And that's a massive benefit to them, but it's also a benefit to you as the employer. And as the slide says, we firmly believe that when employees thrive, so do their employers. So that's my bit there, Glenn. Back to you.
Thank you, Matt. There are no active questions at the moment. I'd be, obviously encourage people to put questions up as we go based on anything that you've heard. But can I also ask, is it Io or Sarah to put the Menti list up back up if possible, so that we can make reference to that as well? But I'll just come back to you, Peter, on a sort of follow-up question to what you've just said. There's a lot of families, the working poor, in terms of, they really are on the breadline, et cetera, et cetera. How does that financial well-being element, how can that support those at that sort of level of income? I mean, this is a personal question. I can see it doing, supporting people at a certain level, but the working poor, how can we help those, in that situation?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Yeah, sorry, but that was for me.
No, that was for Matt.
Oh, no, sorry. Oh, thank goodness for that.
No worries. Yeah, so I mean, when we're looking at financial well-being, it feels like the obvious answer is pay everyone more, but that's not practical, and it's actually not the issue. When we look at those 4 financial well-being pillars, it's about people having control over their money. So even the working poor, it's about giving them the ability to know what money's coming in, when it's coming in, what money's going out, when it's going out, and allowing them to get control of that, to even simple things, understand more efficient ways of using their money, paying their bills, compare the market, encouraging people to do that. It's all part of this education process where you try and get people to get a grip on their money, manage their money, not let their money manage them. And even with people on low incomes, it is possible to improve their financial well-being, if not directly their financial position.
No, thank you for that. Any other thoughts from the other panels on that question, or shall we move on to some of the other stuff that we were talking about? I just want to look at some of the Menti questions, but yeah, any other thoughts on what Matt's just said?
Nothing.
Okay. Here's a question. More industry, well, it may be a comment, I haven't read it first. More industry joined up thinking to enable better use of resource. The Lighthouse Club in St Mary's is currently working on a project aimed at micro self-employed market in terms of suicide prevention and improved mental health. The comments here today are very relevant for this project. Thank you, Andy. I absolutely agree. So let's come back to Peter. In terms of how do we help small businesses, and this comes back to Fiona again, part of the question I asked earlier, how do we actually help the smaller businesses take benefit of all the stuff that we're doing here, and get it into, like I say, get it to the man with a shovel in it, get it to the person on the end of the shovel. Yeah, carry on.
If I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't be sitting here. It really it's one of those questions. It's a perennial question, and it comes up at every meeting I go to, and whether it's at Cognac or within Seeker or the Health and Construction Leadership Group, and it is exactly that. It's how do we influence? And there's been a number of initiatives which have been tried in sort of smaller scale, and I do think there's value in it. So one of the things is, if you go down to your DIY store on a weekend, it's actually full of white vans and 2 or 3 people collecting goods who are in the trade. They are, they are working. It's their professional, their lives. And one of the approaches would be to try and single out the likes of, the Wicks, the Dewsons, the B&Q, the home stores, etc., and to try and have some sort of concerted campaign right at the and machine plant hire, tool hire companies, whereby the SMEs, that's their go-to market. So at least we're providing some sort of opportunity for them to engage and at least be given or have access to information that might help them. But I think it's a really, really difficult question and solution to solve.
Yeah, thank you for that, Peter. And I agree. I think if we could crack this nut, it's a big nut to crack. So, Fiona, is there anything from if you like, from the client side of things like HST that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really tough one, and it's like, how do you know you're making an impact? And it's something actually our CEO is really passionate about, is that when we're delivering all this stuff, and particularly at maybe a tier 1 level, we can be doing brilliant health and well-being, doing all the right things, but his question always is, how do we know that's getting right down to every person that's touching the project? So what we tried to do differently on the project this time was to make sure that we've got dedicated health and well-being occupational health specialists in place in all of the on all of the main joint ventures, but also is make sure that they're supporting people with the support that they're providing, the training, sharing that experience that is going right down, and actually sharing some of those services. Now it's done differently still, so it's not still consistent, but what we're trying to do is drive those standards, improve the standards so that people are getting access to the same thing and being able to make the changes, because we know that individuals that are a small organization, 2 or 3 people, won't have the same access, same resources and support as a big organization. So we feel we have a role to play in that. We need to be providing that to them as well, and actually getting them involved in any of the on-site activities, on-site campaigns, awareness, whatever it is. But, you know, actually we have a role to play in that. So, you know, how are we doing on it so far? It's difficult to say, it's still early days, but it is something that we're very, very aware of, that we need to do better in this space.
And I think I mean, there is sometimes and this is the challenge that I put out all the time, is we need to be asking the question in a different way. And I'm not necessarily saying what that way is, but I think if we can, I think we often look at these issues and yeah, year after year after year after year, and we're asking the same questions. Is there a different way of looking at the question? And maybe that might be a different way into helping solve it. I don't know the answer to that, but if somebody else does, maybe that's something we can bring out.
I just wanted to weigh in on sort of getting education, getting help to people. I mean, one of the things we focused on during lockdown, obviously we couldn't send any of our trainers out to people. So we focused very strongly on e-learning provision. Mm-hmm. And there is an awful lot you can do with digital provision. I think the latest ONS stats said they had 96% of households in the UK have internet access. And when we think about our own people, the people who work for us, whether they've got smartphones or not, digital access to resources has never been more widespread. Mm. And that has to be a part of the picture. You know, you can provide an awful lot digitally. It's not ideal, you know, even as part of the digital education team. Our preference is always put one person in front of another person and let them talk. Yeah. But digital solutions, given the widespread nature of people having smartphones, having tablets at home, that is a real way to access as many people as possible. And yes, given it's e-learning, it tends to be cheaper than getting a person in face to face. So access and
routes to routes to support, I think, is and maximise the routes to support that people can
and on physical health, I think it's important that acknowledging information isn't always enough for people to make a change. And, you know, being healthy it's not always easy, and it's harder for some groups than others. So in order to really make a difference, you need to find interventions that really target the people that you're trying to reach, your employees, and understanding what barriers your employees might face to making those changes. And by understanding what's stopping them from making that change, because we know that, you know, most people who smoke want to stop, but understanding what the barriers are to, for example, to them stopping smoking, and then understanding which of those barriers might be in your control as an employer, or what you can do to support your employee to remove some of those barriers to making that change. That's really where you can make a difference and make being healthy easier for the workers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Why do 1 in 10 people who've had a heart transplant still smoke? So there's a question here, which is the government furlough scheme was quick and robust and has helped people keep people ticking over financially, helping to keep things like potential spikes in crime rates down. What impact do we think it will have when it is finally switched off? Maybe not just construction, but wider issues. I think this one's aimed at Matt, really.
To dive in there, it's going to depend hugely on how employers react to the furlough scheme being switched off. If people start rationalising their workforces, then clearly you're going to have a large proportion of the workforce suddenly find themselves in very, very straitened financial positions. And just from a well-being point of view, not even money in the bank account, that's going to have roll-on impacts to their physical health, to their mental health, to their relationships. So it could be bad. One would hope that the government and employers will act responsibly in giving people a way to avoid a cliff edge approach to that. You know, the scheme turns off, the jobs turn off. That's not something anyone wants to see, I don't think. But it could be very bad for people. We're looking to see the economy recover, losses be avoided. But yeah, I mean, I can't speak directly for the construction industry, but certainly hospitality is someone we work with closely, and it's been a very, very rough time, and they're not looking optimistically at the end of furlough.
I think absolutely it's one to watch. We have to be aware that it's a huge potential risk, isn't it? So, Sophia, I want to come back to what I was saying earlier on around sort of the emotional impact of cancers, both on the individual, with the cancer, and also the people around them, and how that might impact them at work and stuff in terms of distraction. Are there any things that you can think of in terms of how employers can support people, either caring for, what more can employers do around it for caring for people who might have cancer? Is that something that you look at in terms of Research UK, Cancer Research UK?
So yeah, as I mentioned, 1 in 2 people are going to develop cancer in their lifetime, and many more will have a loved one, who develops cancer. So it's going to affect the majority of people in the UK at some point. And I think if you know someone who's been diagnosed personally and thinking about what support, how you felt during that time and what support you might have needed, then that's a really good place to start in thinking about what you could potentially be offering someone else. But just thinking about, cancer is a bit different to COVID in that for many people, it's not, COVID, a lot of people who get it may, recover quite quickly. But for cancer, treatments can go on for months. And so it's not something that's going to be over quickly for employees. It could be, dragged out over months or even years in terms of it could be treated and then come back. So I think just listening is really important, and asking someone what they need is always, I'd say, the best approach, because they will know best what support they might want or need, and what space they might need at work in order to protect their mental and physical health, as well as what time they might need to support the loved one who is going through that cancer at that time.
Yeah, and with the delay in a lot of treatments as a result of COVID, then I can imagine that's going to.
Yeah, so because of COVID, over the last year, we've seen 45,000 fewer people starting cancer treatments. That's going to have a huge impact on cancer in the next few years, because we know also that half of people during the first lockdown experienced cancer symptoms and didn't go and talk to their doctor about it. So that's another role as an employer, encouraging your employees to seek contact their doctor if they have experienced any unusual symptoms, because we know that if cancer is caught at an early stage, treatment is more likely to be successful. And there's a lot of people who maybe have been missed or haven't come through the system because of fear of COVID or delays to treatments and tests, and that's going to have probably a massive impact in the years to come. So that's something that we're really focusing on as a charity in terms of encouraging people to come forward. There might still be delays because of COVID, but it's still really important. And the sooner you get seen, the sooner it's possible that you'll get an earlier treatment.
Yeah, on a purely personal level, my sister-in-law's sister, they 2 months ago was diagnosed with stage 3, close to stage 4 ovarian cancer, and again, it's exactly that. She didn't go early doors. And fortunately, they still think she's curative, but yeah, it's a touch and go situation with her. So I would absolutely support what you're saying there in terms of get in early, and sort of, sorry, Fiona, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, and I think that's where we have a role as employers and as an organisation to be thinking about as part of our health and wellbeing strategy is how do we keep raising the awareness around, cancer and signs and symptoms, so that we're educating the workforce, so that we are encouraging them to go and seek support early to that point, because otherwise, if we need to still focus on the other elements of health, and talk about those symptoms, because people will be still afraid to go and access treatment. We need to try and encourage that kind of security again, to go back and see the GP. And I think we have a role within the industry, particularly working with our occupational health teams, and that is looking at that kind of, lifestyle. It could be lifestyle questionnaires, it could be, one-to-ones, but actually trying to, proactively be picking up on some of that stuff, looking at our demographics as well. If we've got a population which is mainly in the 40s, well, what are the risk categories for health in those areas, and starting to thinking about our preventative approach to reducing those long-term chronic conditions as well.
Yeah.
And also those practical barriers to people seeing the doctor. It could be difficult getting an appointment at a convenient time. And is there anything you can do as an employer to give your employee the time to go and speak to the doctor? So, they may think they can't take the time off work, but is there anything you can do to support them to do that?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm conscious of the time. We have 3 minutes to go, and I think that's been an excellent conversation. So with 3 minutes, I'm just going to give you each an opportunity. Is there anything else you want to say, a point that you'd like to make as part of this conversation? So I'll start with Peter and give the other people a quick chance to think. You're on mute, Peter.
Right, no, thank you. Yes, what I was going to say was that there are many initiatives out there, far many that you can shake a stick at. And I would just say that actually just choose the one that you think actually you can manage yourself, the one that is most appropriate. And even a small improvement is better than no improvement at all.
Yeah, start somewhere.
I know that sounds negative, but when some organisations, and particularly looking at SME organisations, when they're looking at the great, if you look at the stress management standards, 200 pages, documents, etc., don't go there. Go to something which is far more bite-sized, far more relevant to yourself, and then actually, hopefully, that can actually make a big difference.
Yep. Thank you, Peter. Fiona?
Yeah, I suppose for me, it's looking at what your data is telling you at the moment. Try and keep it simple. Don't try and solve every health and wellbeing risk factor, because you won't succeed at anything. And get advice, find out what others are doing. Stay with pride. I do the whole time. Stay with pride.
It's a phrase I've heard so many times. Yeah.
Yeah, but do, and people, there's nothing better I love when people come and ask me, and to be able to give advice and say, look, if I was doing it this way, I would do it like this in the future, because I never thought about X, Y, and Z. Find out from others, get good advice, get good, competent advice. There's a lot of individuals out there at the moment that are claiming to be wellbeing experts. Check that they are. That would be another piece. And I think as well, let's not forget about the occupational diseases in construction. If we can tackle the noise, the skin disorders, the cancers and all of that, actually people's well-being will improve as well, because we're reducing that risk to them. So, I always say, look at mental health, musculoskeletal, but don't forget, the occupational diseases that kill people.
Yeah. Sophia?
Yeah, just thinking back to the theme of the conference, prevention is better than cure, just remembering that there are lots of things that people can do to reduce their risk of cancer, and that will improve their health and well-being in the round as well. So, just thinking about simple things that you can do to help people to, stop smoking, keep a healthy weight, being safe in the sun, drinking less alcohol, but really remembering that, it's not always easy for people to make these changes. So what can you do and why it's so important for you to support your employees to make these changes. And Cancer Research UK have a wealth of information and resources and support that we can offer on our website and through our workplace health programs. So really look to see what's out there, think about what you can do to support your employees, but remember that 4 in 10 can be prevented. So what changes could you make?
Thank you. And Matt.
Just echo a lot of what's been said, what Fiona said. Understand as an employer what risks your organisation faces. Ask your workforce what problems they're up against, what help they need, and go out and see what help's available to you. There's a lot of great charities, great member organisations who are doing amazing things to help, and obviously there are some of us in the commercial sector who are also, we like to think, doing great things to help. There's a lot more help out there than you think.
Thank you very much, all. My takeaway: keep it simple, do something. Yeah, remember it's prevention as well as cure, and there's plenty of help out there. Yeah. So thanks for that, and I'm going to hand back to Bryony to introduce the first wellbeing moment. Thank you, panel. I'm hoping I'm passing back to Bryony.
You should be handing back to me, indeed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Glenn, for your contribution. Thank you for managing the time. We're only a couple of minutes over, which I think is almost a success. Yes, I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the session that we're going to have 4 wellbeing moments during the day. When I mentioned this to one of my colleagues on the first steering group, they told me you must have Ashley. So Ashley Glover is from Bam Nuttall, and I will leave him to take over from me. Thank you, Ashley. Are you there?
Good morning. Unfortunately, I can't turn my video on. Someone else has turned it off.
Right.
Oh, here we go.
Excellent.
There we go.
Okay, I'll turn mine off now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryony. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to come and share some thoughts with you this morning on my story. In November 2019, I was diagnosed with cancer. This came after a week of pretty intense tests. I was in a different hospital room every day having a scan for this or a biopsy for that. And then at the end of that week, I'm sat in front of a urologist who tells me I've got advanced prostate cancer, that this is not curable, but it is manageable, and that with my scores from the test, statistically, I've got 2 to 5 years. As you'd imagine, that's a huge impact. Sitting in that chair and having that information passed to me, genuinely life-changing. I have to remember that I'm not alone in this. Life-changing events happen all over the place every day, all around us. And this is just part of my adventure. And when none of us know what's coming tomorrow. So key piece for me out of this is living today. My first next steps, I had to go stay with my parents to get some initial treatment and sort out what was going on. A pretty scary time, really. I remember being driven away from my house by a great friend and colleague, and actually wondering whether I was coming back because I didn't really know what was going on. I did come back, here I am. But then, having had that initial treatment, a bit of time for reflection, a new plan. My plan A was not going to roll out as I thought it was. I quickly got myself into a place, and I'm not quite sure how I did this, but recognizing that while I can't change the fact of the cancer, I'm 100% in control of my response to it and to living with it. And that's taken me down a route of meditation and mindfulness, general well-being work, exercise, and so on. The next challenge to come along was I was just getting back into the office and back into work and writing plan B and developing plan B, and along came COVID and lockdown. Now, while I've got a very supportive partner and good friends and family, I actually live alone. So you could add to those challenges the isolation, the lack of human contact. There are occasions where I've not actually seen a physical human being for several days, which is challenging. And I'm on a hormone therapy at the moment, which does have quite a big emotional impact on me from time to time. I have black dog days. So all of that was part of the challenge. But back to being in control of my future, my future adventure. Now, the first thing for me really brought into focus, what does this thing, life balance, mean when we talk about it? And note that I call it life balance, not work-life balance. I'm not a fan of the phrase work-life balance because work is an integral part of life. It's not something that's opposed to life or in contrast with life, it's built in. So let's get our lives in balance and living for today. Spending time doing the things that I love doing, spending time with the people I love being with, being present, being in the moment. It's really changed. Sounds trivial, but it's really changed the way I go for a walk. When you're out there, do you feel the earth beneath your feet? Do you feel the wind and weather on your face? Do you see the myriad of colours and sounds around you when you do that? It makes a massive difference. And as part of developing my plan B, as it were, I got in touch with an old mentor of mine, an ex-director of the business, who unfortunately passed away around about this time last year. But prior to his illness hitting him, we had some very good conversations. And we talked a lot about relationships with others. And one of the things that came out of this conversation was the question of, are we human beings or are we human doings? COVID has pushed us very much towards the doing. We spend lives, it's already been mentioned this morning, in this environment, remote contact, working on screens, everything becomes very transactional. So how often do we talk to each other and our colleagues on a human basis as opposed to a work basis? How much time do we make for being human? How often do we check in with our team members that they're checking in with each other on a non-work basis? Now, I've developed a good network, I already had a good network, but the support from the business and the people around me has been fantastic. I have to say that it's an interesting piece here, isn't it? There's a lot of stigma or taboo around should you talk about these topics or not. Now, from my perspective, absolutely we should talk about it. The messages that I've had, the support messages, have been brilliant. They've been part of my treatment, in truth. And little things, how are you? I'm sorry to hear, ... They're a huge supportive piece of the puzzle, and they've helped me get back into a pretty good space. So with an eye on the clock, some takeaways for you from this and from my experience. But is your life in balance? Are you giving yourself time to refresh? Are you spending enough time with the people that you love? Are you spending enough time doing the things you love? Are you making time to talk? Are you reaching out with people and checking in with people? Are you generating a culture where those check-ins are encouraged and part of the way we do things? In short, are you a human being or are you a human doing? Thank you. Back to Bryony, I think.
Oops. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ashley. Well, food for thought. I hope you will all consider what Ashley has said to us. It's sobering to think that, as we were told by Sophia earlier, that 1 in 2 will have some brush with cancer at some point or another. So please, please take note of what Ashley says. Think about every day and enjoy every day. Get your life in balance, not your work life. Get your life in balance. Thank you very much, Ashley. Now, we've built in a 10-minute break. well, we built in a 15-minute break, but I have always thought if we get, if we're only 5 minutes over at the break, that'll be a success. So I'm putting a tick in my success box. Please go off, have a glass of water, make yourself a cup of coffee, stretch your legs, take some deep breaths, go outside if you can, whatever. But we will be starting up again at 11:50. So please join us again then. Thank you very much. Okay, Peter.
Okay, thank you. Right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you feel fully refreshed and revitalised for the next session. Excuse me. Right. For those who've just joined, my name's Peter Crossland. I'm the National Civil Engineering Director with Seeker, and I'll be chairing this panel 2 session. I mean, this, hopefully you can see the screen with the title and the attendees on the panel. Just to confuse you completely, we're going to be doing the introductions in a slightly different order that appears there. But first of all, what I'd like to do is just pose the Menti question, which hopefully will appear on your screens shortly. Just so that you can be thinking about and inputting to the question, how does your organisation promote wellbeing in the workplace? So those who've just joined, if you go onto the menti.com website and use the code which is on the top of the page that is being displayed now, then you can input into that, and then we can have a look at the responses once the panel have introduced themselves. So just with that, I mean, this question really, it's similar to the previous one, has become one of the most commonly asked questions, I think, of 2020 and 21, and I believe it will continue to be asked for some time, obviously as the increased focus comes on well-being. Principally due to the fact that there are so many varied and complex industry issues. I think no one solution fits all, so everybody's going to, I think, have a different view on it. I think the ubiquitous bowl of fruit is no longer acceptable. What never was in my book. And we have to look at each situation on its own merits. And of course, good practice, best practice, and the sharing of it is to be, as we've said before in the previous session, is to be encouraged. And interestingly, that I actually have the same phrase down here that Fiona used, pinch with pride, so long with a caveat, so long as there isn't a copyright on it. So hopefully you'll hear some real nuggets of advice from our presenters, which you can take away and implement in your own organisation. So if I could just ask each member of the panel to introduce themselves, similar to panel 1, and then perhaps to offer their own thoughts around what either your own organisation does or what you've actually seen elsewhere, and perhaps with a focus on that preventative measure. And I know that some of you have got your own slides, so we'll do that as well. So first up, if I can introduce Eddie Murphy. Eddie is the founder and managing director of Olio Building Performance Consultancy. Eddie, over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Just let me share screen. So you should be able to see my screen now. Can you give me the thumbs up on that, Pete?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you for inviting me. By way of introduction, I'm Eddie Murphy, not an actor. I'm a chartered building services engineer by discipline. I'm also an accredited well-build practitioner, and for my sins also an accredited Scrum Master. My career, I suppose, so far has always been in the building services design consultancy industry. But in 2016, I left big practice after a 30-year career, which took me to White Young Green, Arab, and I was a director at Mott MacDonald for 13 years. In 2016, I kind of left all that behind to form Olio, the Building Performance Consultancy. I called it Olio because if you spell it out, you get 0 to 10. And that's really as a reinforcement of the concept that it's the first 10% of project time that actually becomes the most important part of the project when it comes to getting the strategic expectation that we want from the outcome of the project at the other end. So in essence, we're a consultancy that specializes in maximizing the performance outcomes of buildings from a user's perspective. We're answering the questions of how clients, designers and constructors get to build outcomes that are healthier, more productive spaces for people, really for the people who work there. Always with the idea that as well as doing no harm to the planet, we're also doing no harm to the people who actually occupy those buildings. So with that kind of as an introduction, I'll kind of take this one the way. I kind of thought we should just have a little look at some of the sort of day-to-day kind of things that we've been kind of finding as we've gone through the process of being sort of health and well-being consultants at the shovel, so to speak. So I think the first thing it's worth to having a look at is as well-being AP, I should, I suppose, give a little plug to the Health Safety Seal, which is a branded seal for those people those organizations who want to move back into their buildings and to be able to tell their customers and their staff that the building is being operated in a safe post-pandemic way. So it was developed as a response predominantly to the COVID pandemic to promote clean contacts, improve air quality, maintain water quality, all those kind of things that you can kind of think, and even down to making sure movement control is managed, and then the staff themselves are being looked after, that their immune responses are being looked after, and even mental health and resilience. Now you can literally sign up to this online and pay a fee and get your health safety seal, and it's been widely promoted in the States, probably not quite so well known here in the UK. One of the things you kind of will have seen there is this whole area of air quality, which is an area that we've kind of got involved in fairly significantly, particularly since the pandemic has actually happened. We know an awful lot about external air quality, and we hear a lot about external air quality, but we don't really know too much about what's actually happening internally. And a lot of that is actually because we don't really know how to measure it quite so well as the external air quality measurement devices are very many thousands of pounds. You couldn't actually have those internally, because the cost of them are just so humongous. But researchers have been back, and effectively they're telling us that we're actually living in a complete soup of chemicals indoors. And on this particular slide here, those ones that are towards the bottom of this list, benzene, heptane, toluenes, let me say they're not particularly good for you. And indeed, they actually exist in our homes, offices and schools, sometimes at levels that are probably even carcinogenic. Now, if we think that actually it's the building that's causing this, we kind of almost need to think again. De Gennaro came along with this study that actually found that when pupils come back into the classroom from being outside at play, they actually measured that the levels of these chemicals actually shoot through the roof. And a lot of that is actually down to literally the products we wear, also cleaning materials and all of those kind of things. And so whilst I'm conscious that we're all doing a hell of a lot more cleaning and scrubbing at this particular moment in time, the question is out there, are we actually doing some harm as well whilst we're doing all that cleaning, because we're releasing so much more VOCs into the atmosphere. Now, I have got a little sort of model here, which actually sort of begs to this question about, how do we actually sort of use that control device that we have, which we call a window. Lots of people kind of open windows, but how many people actually understand what really happens to the air when we open a window? And essentially, the kind of easement is a correct way to ventilate a room. So if you've got a room such as this, which should really be not, you know, for a single-sided ventilation, we should be looking to ventilate 2.5 times. The room can be 2.5 times the depth deep as it is high. So the wall is probably 3 meters here, so we can ventilate with a single-sided window up to 7.5 meters quite safely. And what actually happens, you'll actually see, if I kind of just run this slide just a little bit again. So to get a clearer view of that air as it's coming through. So as the bright colors means the air is flowing fast, the less bright means it's kind of still and not running so fast. But you can actually see when air runs into a room, it comes in at the bottom of the opening, drops to the floor, runs across the floor, and effectively what it does then is it finds you, and you're a heat source. So there's a plume of air going over the top of you, coming from the top of your head. You draw that fresh air from the floor up across your body. It goes up to high level, and then if it can find a way out at high level, it will go. So as the methodology, that should help you to understand how to use your windows. So effectively, I would say, open the bottom one as much as you dare, you know, to keep it comfortable. Open the top ones as well, at least twice the amount of the amount that you've opened at the bottom. If you've got just one opening, what will happen is it will naturally find its way. The air will come in through the bottom of the window and go out through the top of the window. So that's kind of how it will work. And the higher difference between where the air comes in and where the air goes out, that's what actually governs exactly how much flow. So a little sort of bit of background, sort of technical guide on how we kind of, we need to sort of think about windows. The other thing about going back to buildings is that if you haven't got windows and you're in an air-conditioned office, then there are things that you can do there too. And essentially that comes around air handling units that bring fresh air in from outside. They usually have filters. One of the things that you can do is actually upgrade them. And you can upgrade them if they have what's called an F7 carrier. You can actually put a better filter in there that will even take out up to 98% of the pandemic pathogen microbes. So there are things you can do there. The other thing there is think about HEPA filters. So you'll kind of see these room filters. So you can actually, literally your Argos or your Boots or people like that, buy yourself a really good room filter, cleaning filter, place it in your room. That will actually help as well to take out some of the pathogens. If you're kind of wondering where to go for information on air quality, I can't think of anybody better than this lady, Dr. Shelley L. Miller, who's at Boulder University. And you will remember there's a lot of debate going on as to whether COVID actually moved through the air or whether it was really just close contact. I think she was the one that actually moved World Health Organization to actually think about air and sort of ventilation as a route to the spread of, to mitigating the spread of COVID. Bryony asked me to talk about plants, but I don't think she wanted me to talk about this kind of plants. She was kind of more thinking about these kinds of plants. So plants, believe it or not, are good for air quality. They do actually suck in quite a lot of the sort of the nasties in the air. And the best varieties for that are, particularly ones with large leaves. So the larger the leaves, probably the more likely it is to be good. But there are, you can just search the web and you'll find lots of information on which plants are actually best. And I think what she really wanted me to kind of mention most was the fact that there has been a recent study. It did actually appear in The Guardian at one particular point in time, but it was undertaken by these two gentlemen, Haslam and Knights, at the University of Exeter, and actually published in the Journal of Psychology. And they actually found that when you actually put plants into a room, so they took an office in London with two floors, put plants on one floor, and then measured the productivity of the people with the plants as against the people who hadn't got plants, and they found that productivity rose in the room where the plants were. And then what they decided to do, well, let's see if this really is the case. So they took the plants away, put them into the room downstairs, and lo and behold, productivity in the room where it was high decreased, and productivity in the room where it wasn't high increased because the plants had. Now it turns out that it's not particularly the plants that are causing it, it's actually the fact that it was seen that the plants and even pictures have an effect that actually make the people who are working in the office feel more appreciated. And so this same study actually went on to find that, and probably echoing some of the previous speakers' findings, the greatest effect on productivity and mental health and well-being was interior design, but actually more powerful than that was workplace empowerment and autonomy. So it's actually the culture of your organization that counts most when it comes to health, well-being and productivity. And with that, Peter, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Well, I do realise and appreciate it just overran slightly, but I knew you had that example to give. And I think it's just such a fantastic example that hopefully that everybody else benefited from it as well. So everybody get yourself down to the garden centre, go and get a whole load of plants and there you go. Right, okay, thanks Eddie. And there's plenty of questions I think that that will generate as well. So could I move on to Sarah, please? So Sarah Bolton, Head of Charitable Services from the Lighthouse Club. Over to you, Sarah, thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So my name's Sarah Bolton. I'm Head of Charitable Services for the Lighthouse charity, and we're here to support people in construction. I've got some slides I'm going to share with you about some things that we suggest that people can put into their businesses to start to be proactive in their support. So our mission is that we don't want any construction worker or their family to be alone in a crisis. And we've put together quite a lot of preventative tools and supportive tools to assist people and basically be a one-stop shop for people to go to should they require support. So initially what we would suggest is that if as a company you commit to making a difference, so obviously that helps to reduce the stigma. You can go onto the Building Mental Health Charter and sign the charter to say that you are actively supporting people with mental health in your businesses. There's lots of resources on there that you can utilise and take down into your business. Secondly is we've developed an app, the Construction Industry Helpline app, which helps people to self-serve and to look at information regarding the 3 pillars of support. So we have financial support, physical support and mental support, emotional support, sorry. So what the information on there is we have sleep station, so promotion about good sleep, how to manage emotions, how to manage your finances, and any physical illnesses that may be affecting you, how to manage those. There's lots of resources on there. And the idea is that if you proactively can support yourself and reduce the risk of going to crisis point, it's easier for us to support you. We also have a training process. So we have masterclasses that we run every month based on lots of different topics, mindfulness, meditation, work-life balance. All of these are to help you to manage your emotions and your stresses during work and to keep you in work and be proactive. Lastly, for those people that really do need some additional support or their situation is slightly more serious, they can come to our helpline. And this is the second thing we advise is to have, if you haven't got an employee assistance program in place, you can use our helpline. It's completely free of charge and we can assist with financial support, counselling and lots of other information. Another thing that is good to introduce when you're doing your inductions and toolbox talks is a toolbox talk about mental health and about how to reduce the stigma. So I think it's important that everybody feels comfortable to open the conversation. A lot of problems we have in mental health is because people don't want to have the conversation. And if we just started, sometimes that's all people need is just have a little download. It's not necessarily about more serious issues. Further on from that, you can have mental health first aiders in your business. We do a half-day awareness course, which is great for opening the conversation to get people to recognise signs and symptoms and how to approach people that they might be managing and how to give support. And if once you have your first aiders in place, it's making sure that you're supporting those first aiders. So these are people that are voluntarily helping. They're not necessarily qualified psychologists, and they may hear some, troubling stories, and it's always a good idea to give them support. So it built into our app that we will release version 3 this year. There is a support mechanism for first aiders as well. So just going on from that, obviously our education and training program covers lots of information. It's completely free of charge and it's run every month. You can sign up through our website, and the app is free to download on the App Store and the Play Store. We're also in the process of creating what we're going to be calling lighthouses, beacons of hope. So we've done some research. We commissioned a report with Caledonian University in relation to suicides. And what it showed us is that we're definitely getting the message upper level management, but unfortunately in the boots on the ground and the skilled trades, we're not actually getting the message across. What we have noticed is that there are some self-help groups that are really being successful engaging with the boots on the ground. So with that in mind, we're looking to create safe spaces across England and Ireland that we can work in partnership with other men's group, and offers a space of safety for people to go to and chat to like-minded people with lived experience, and to access counselling should it be required. So just 3 golden nuggets that we'd like you to take away, which I think we're all very busy in our lives, and this is always a good way we start our mental health first aid programme, is to ask twice. I think we're all guilty of asking how you are, but not necessarily listening to the response. Seek to understand before you seek to be understood. So make sure you're really listening. I think we are trained to read, we are trained to write. Are we actually trained to listen? Not really. It is a skill. It does need to be developed. And if you're going to ask somebody and give them the time, make sure you've got the time to listen and the capacity. And I think the final thing is just always be kind. I think if we show a bit more kindness and empathy, people are more likely to open up. And the sooner we get to people support, the more likely they are to stay and work. And as we say, prevention is easier to manage than when they've fallen into crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. I think there's certainly some common work to be done there, particularly, as you say, if we're not getting the message through to those with the boots on the ground, then there's definitely some joined up work that industry can do or should do to try and move that on. And I know, given the recent statistics, that that's even more important, that we do try and approach those perhaps the unskilled, the trades, the finishers within the building environment, who we know are at probably more risk than others. So yeah, lots to do on that. Okay, moving on. Next speaker, we have Laura Haig, Group Safety Manager from McDonald. And Laura, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and hi everybody. It's great to be here today. So I've got a few slides as well, so let me just share those. So hopefully you can see those now. Can you see those, Peter?
Yes, sorry, I beg your pardon.
That's okay. So there we go. So I wanted to just share today a little bit about our wellbeing programme and some of the ways that we're promoting it. But before I do that, I just wanted to pick up on some of the points that have been made earlier today around senior management buy-in and the importance of getting that exec board commitment, I think. And I just wanted to share one of the things that worked for us in McDonald. So it's probably about 5 years ago now, we put together a business case for wellbeing. So we've been doing lots of work around wellbeing, but we hadn't really got a strategy across the group. And we were doing bits and pieces, but it wasn't really a proper holistic approach. So I put together a business case to go together to the group board. And there was, I suppose, all the usual things that you would find in there around productivity, morale, recruitment, retention. But the thing that really hit home and got the attention was around the cost. And the board were very aware of the cost of sickness absence in the group. So around that time, it was costing us about £16 million a year globally in sickness absence. But one of the things I was able to share with them was we'd taken part in Britain's Healthiest Workplace survey, which is a free survey run by Vitality. And what that helped to do was to look at something called the cost of presenteeism. So where people are actually at work, but they're not productive. So their mind is elsewhere, they're distracted, they've got things going on that is really, you know, that they're present, but they're not working. And the way that the survey worked, the cost of presenteeism for those people who took part averaged out at double what our sickness absence was, so another 18 million. So that took that cost really up to 36 million. And I sent this paper into our MD, and I got a call back within, you know, the day, which really surprised me, saying, you know, this can't be right. Where has this figure come from? And so it was just really a mention to those of you who maybe are struggling, that something like that for me was really instrumental in getting that attention. And now, you know, wellbeing here in Mott MacDonald is seen, it's really up there with safety. The board papers that I do, wellbeing is on those board papers throughout the whole of the structure of the organisation, being discussed at that senior management level. So that was just a quick note on that, really. So what you can see on the screen is the purpose, really, of our wellbeing programme, our mantra, and the strategy is really built around that. In terms of the programme itself, I'm sure that many of you will have a global calendar that you put together a series of events. I suppose one of the things that has changed this year is that we took a lot more time at the end of last year, with all the change and all the disruption impacting people differently, as we've acknowledged. We really wanted to reach out and hear from people what they wanted to see in the wellbeing programme, and we've had a lot more engagement as a result of that. So we've got a wellbeing network, so we engage with our wellbeing champions, our HR and safety communities. And what we've done really to promote the programme is to organise monthly calls with that community. At the beginning of every month, we will talk to them about what we've covered in the previous month, what the events are coming up, what the focus is going to be. And they have been absolutely fantastic this year in really reaching out to colleagues, promoting what's going on, promoting the benefits of it. But we've tried to make it easier for them as well. So you can see that we send out an email which has got all the links in, it's got descriptions of what we're doing, and that really helps them to communicate with their teams, with their projects and all parts of the business. So, you know, there's some examples on the slide there of some of the events that we've been running. We also use these calls with the wellbeing champions to get feedback. So, you know, what's gone well, what do they want to hear more about, and get ideas from them as well. And last year in our wellbeing events, we were probably getting around between 50 and 70 people turning up to webinars, events. This year, it's been in the region of 200 to 300. So we've really seen an increase in engagement, and I think, you know, largely down to our Wellbeing Champions network, who've just really been engaged. One of the other things that we've introduced at the beginning of this year as well was we looked at our health and safety incident reporting process, and we've introduced a category for reporting what we call wellbeing interventions. So people can report these now, and so far this year we've had over 1,000 reported. And so this can be something that you've done yourself to try and improve your wellbeing. It could be a conversation you've had with a colleague, and what we're doing is looking at those, learning and then sharing that out. So producing, in the same way that we have safety moments, producing wellbeing moments that we can share with our teams, and share that learning as well. So that's been a really positive introduction. I just wanted to pick out a couple of promotional campaigns that have worked well this year. And the first one we called Just January. And this was really, at the end of last year, we were thinking about what some of the issues were, and this has been picked up throughout the day today, I think, about people not getting checked out, whether it's about a physical health concern, whether it's about something that's niggling you, something that you need to change, something that you want to create a habit of or stop doing, like smoking. So we got this campaign together called Just January. We had a couple of webinars attached to that where we had health professionals coming in talking about the importance of getting checked out, particularly if you notice differences in your body, physically or mentally. And we had a really positive reaction to that campaign, and it's really helped to keep, we've been keeping this message going all year, actually, because it resonated with people. The other one that I wanted to highlight is what we've called our principles of engagement. This came from an idea on one of our wellbeing calls with the wellbeing champions, and it was really down to this, what we call the back-to-back meeting. This on our company intranet, this has got more hits than anything else that's been posted this year. And obviously, people, it's really struck a chord with people. And so what we've put together is these sort of high level principles. We were going to call them rules, but that doesn't always go down well. But things that people can do to support their own well-being, to help each other, and if you're a line manager, things that you can do just to try and set a good example and support your teams. That it's not it's not rocket science, and lots of people will be doing these things anyway. I think it's more about empowering people to say, this is okay. You're allowed to not be available. You're allowed to be offline sometimes. There was a question earlier about, the change in IT and being in front of our screens and the increased pressure that brings. And that's certainly something that we've experienced. This went down so well that we followed it up with 2 supporting campaigns. One is around meeting etiquette, so online meetings, and looking at the 3 areas at the top. Then this is an interactive screen, but I haven't got that version here. So around scheduling meetings, around being productive, and well-being aspects as well. And then the one that we've just launched this month actually is around availability. So looking at we use Microsoft Teams, there's this pressure, I think, that people feel that they have to be seen to be available all the time. And the other thing, I think, we're halfway through the year now. I just had an email from HR this week looking at people who've taken annual leave. And in my bit of the business, there's about 500 of us in the sort of corporate services. A significant number of people so far this year have only taken the bank holidays off. They haven't taken any additional leave. And I think, that's an indication of the workload, the demands and the pressure that people are feeling. I was on leave last week, and it's made a huge difference. And as managers, I think we've got to really push people to take the leave that they need. And finally, just to finish with a sort of going back to strategy, maybe one of the things that we're looking at the moment is this ISO standard, not to get certification in any way, but really to look at our wellbeing programme and to look at the risks that we see as a business and just do a bit of a gap analysis against this standard to see how we're doing. We use the HSE stress management standards as a sort of tool anyway, but we've put a lot of emphasis on people taking control of their well-being. But it's really important, we feel, that we look at how we organise our work as an organisation and make sure that we're not creating additional pressures through the way that we do things. So I'll finish there, if I may, Peter. Thank you very much.
Laura, thank you as always, and really informative, lots to go at. Some really interesting examples as well, and we've already had a question in on the survey that you did, so we might come back and touch on that. And if we don't get the chance, to the person who's asked it, we can deal with it offline anyway. But then one of the questions I might come back to you with Laura is, obviously Mott MacDonald, big organisation. I just wonder, how many of those initiatives might be transferable to the smaller organisations as well. So whilst our last speaker and presenter is going through a piece, then perhaps you can have a think about that. So last but not least, we have Joe Lewis, who's the Partnerships Manager for the British Dietitians Association. And Joe, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Let's get my slides up. Hopefully you can see those.
Yes.
Super. Yeah, so I'm Jo Lewis. I work for the professional body and trade union for dietitians, and we represent 10,000 dietitians across the UK. And Peter mentioned I'm partnerships manager, and about 6 or 7 years ago we started getting calls from a really wide range of organisations looking for tailored support on nutrition for their organisation. They were having trouble accessing expertise, and I think Fiona mentioned earlier the importance of trying to find a registered qualified provider, and in the sort of wellbeing mix they were struggling to identify the right source of help at the time, and so we started to look at workforce nutrition, workplace health. What's the evidence? What's the role of a dietitian? And we've built this program now called Work Ready, and Eddie will be pleased to know that we link Work Ready to the Wellbuilding Institute nourishment work as well. We've got a dietitian that sits on that panel. So lots of work happening behind the scenes, but I'm going to share with you some specifics today about some of the programs that we've got active and some of the kind of evidence that sits behind them. While I'm talking, shrug your shoulders, have a stretch, walk around. We've all been sitting at our desk all morning. So just really briefly, where does nutrition fit in to wellbeing in the workplace? Rachel mentioned the importance of a system-wide approach earlier, and that no one single element is going to be the golden ticket on its own. So certainly want to manage your expectations in relation to nutrition, but you can see there fits into lifestyle behaviours, and the evidence shows that it should always be part of a holistic approach. So looking at good management, good work, and all those kind of things that sit around it is where you're going to have the biggest impact if you're investing in nutrition, and moving beyond that idea of a bowl of fruit, as Peter said before. So thinking about construction workers, everybody's mentioned that these interventions need to be tailored, that we need to be thinking about the different work that people do, and therefore the different kind of enablers and barriers for people doing different work. So I focused here on site workers. That there'll be different barriers and enablers for workers in your industry who are office-based or field workers, or sort of doing a lot of driving between sites. But thinking about your construction workers, the first point is all about the right food and drink to aid focus and concentration, and really linking it to your safety agenda. There are some really sobering studies, I think, which link moderate dehydration with the same performance and cognitive risk as being slightly over the limit for alcohol. So thinking about any of your workers operating machinery and that dehydration risk. And then some sort of awful inquests with tram drivers and nurses who perhaps missed a meal break and caused awful accidents on the way home from their shifts. So it does link quite clearly to safety and this idea of focus and concentration. And thinking about your workers, you'll be aware of some of the limitations that they experience in preparing food, accessing healthier choices, and having the understanding to make the positive choice when it's put in front of them. This idea of a high energy need, which may or may not be true, but it is a factor, and certainly a belief in how you meet those high energy needs with healthier foods and drinks. Lots of long shifts and early starts, and I know the industry is actually doing a lot on shifts and incorporating this travelling from long distances for work as well. But also adequate nutrition living away from home. You may not have the facilities. If you've just got a microwave, how likely are you to cook some veg to go with your meal that night? And these things all have an impact over time on workers' ability to be productive and also their long-term health outcomes. And something that's actually missing from this is food as community. We've talked a lot about mental health and well-being, and we know that if we eat meals together as families, it's a good moment in the day, really positive moment to decompress, download stories from the day. And if you're always eating on your own and you don't have that opportunity, then I think that's something that there are some nice examples from the sector trying to facilitate this kind of social eating and community ideas. So they're the barriers for workers on site that I think you'll probably all be familiar with. And I've picked up some of the evidence-based messages that we promote specifically on mood and well-being, because I know that that's a big focus for today. So really simple messaging, all about eating regular meals, including a range of foods from your diet and keeping well hydrated. So that's about making breakfast a priority, protecting lunch breaks, having available food from all of the important food groups, and then thinking about fluid losses from air conditioning, hot environments, PPE, and all of the environmental factors that go alongside those. So those three things look quite simple. But if we think back to some of the barriers that I talked about before, these are some quotes from an employee focus group that I ran in a construction company. Thinking about those barriers of limited facilities, long shifts, being away from home, lack of knowledge. You know, there are significant barriers in the sector, I think, that require a more structured approach. We can't just leave it down to individuals to make these choices as simple as they seem. And if we want everyone to have a healthy retirement, then we need strategies to support these kind of eating patterns. And again, a simple model, what might a working day look like? Breakfast, snacks can play a really positive role, lots of fluid there. So a simple image, probably not containing any information that people don't know, but it's about putting together a programme that enables people to understand how to put a healthy day together for them with the enablers and barriers that their work presents. A couple more slides, nearly finished. How do we implement it in the workplace? And in Work Ready, we provide a whole range of services. We get asked to do anything from nutrition literacy programs for induction, so e-learning modules, specific support for, I'm doing a lot at the moment, specific support for workers who are off sick with long COVID, and you know, a lot of research behind the scenes on interventions for shift workers. So we, you know, a really wide range of things that can help. But this list are all evidence-based suggestions for activities that you can do to support your workers to improve their nutrition. So providing information, it's not always enough, but there is a lack of nutrition literacy in the UK. So it's a good starting point. And then thinking about the environment that you've got in your workplace as well. So just a final point on Work Ready, that we've got the website there if you want to find out any more about nutrition. There's a huge amount of evidence that you can share with your teams that pulls out those key return on investment figures that have come up before, and you can find out about different kind of things that you can try with your workforce, whether it's, I don't know, having a dietitian to one of your tea and biscuits drop-ins. We've been doing a lot of those specific e-learning activities, workshops, cook-alongs, posters, and all the online tools there. So hopefully that's got you thinking about nutrition and where it can fit into your wider wellbeing strategies. And I'll stop sharing. I think you're on mute, Peter.
I'm on mute and I'd lost my mouse. not a good combination. Joe, thank you very much for that. Say plenty of information to go at. And I'm assuming, I don't think I'm talking out of turn, I'm sure these slides will be available to everybody on the call. So you know, there's a huge amount of information for people to use. Could we possibly just call up the responses to the Mentimeter question, just to see what we covered, if there's anything hanging off the back of those? because I think that all presentations were really quite detailed, so that's why I just left them to run a while. We've got just short 10, 7 or 8 minutes just to go through some of the questions. I'm just looking at, I think if what I could do, I'd like to do is go back to Eddie, and very quickly, if we could just have maybe a minute back from each of the presenters. I'll just perhaps just pick out one of them. Eddie, what would you say would be the easiest, maybe, and associate quickest and cheapest way physical change you can make in an internal space to provide that better, happier workplace? I mean, is it plants, or are there other simple fixes that you might be able to do?
I mean, I think anything that you can do to improve the interior design of your office, to give your people that sense that this is a space that the business cares about, and if the business cares about its office and the facilities that it's providing for its organization, then I think that in itself will actually help with the office workers themselves. So effectively, that plant study was one that was really sort of harping to that. Like everybody, I mean, the Guardian took up the issue of it being the plants, but it wasn't actually the plants that was the issue. It was really the case that actually, though, you created a much better feeling interior. And so they didn't just use plants, they actually had, pictures, and they kind of did, things like that. And it was remarkable, actually, that when they actually took the pictures and the plants away and put them downstairs, that essentially the effect went downstairs with all of that. And they even actually did it the reverse way around. They actually thought, well, is there a hysteresis to this? Can we take them back and put them back again? And would that actually, so it actually even worked again in reverse. So I do think anything that can be done to increase and improve, the interior space, the look, the feel. And I would actually even say, and what we're actually getting involved with, is actually getting users to have a say in that. So don't actually do, and I keep saying to architects, don't do design to people, do design with people. So if you actually get people involved in helping to create what they want as an interior, then actually that will help not just well-being, but actually help productivity as well.
Well, and I think that's the bottom line, isn't it? And it cuts back to some of the work that Laura was referring to in terms of that, the bottom line, return on investment. Thank you, Eddie. Sarah, I'm just scanning through the responses from the Mentimeter, and there's a huge number mentioning mental health first aiders. I'm just want to, if you could you come back on the update that on the app that you're now helping the mental health first aiders with a certain level of support, because I think that was something which obviously was something that Lighthouse Club had identified. Is there anything else that you could say, that what sort of support would the mental health first aiders receive?
Yeah, so if the functionality that is built into the app allows first aiders to report all their interactions. It's completely anonymous. You're not actually reporting the information you discussed. You're just reporting how many interventions you've had. And we can pull data off to analyse whether there's a specific location problem or there's any themes or trends. What it basically asks them to do is to register once, and then you can record all your interventions. And it just asks at the end if you're happy with your intervention, if you need any support, and there's an option for an instructor to call you back and discuss the information you gave out. Secondly, there's an option that if you felt actually that it's triggered something in you, some vicarious trauma that you need to discuss, we can get a counsellor to call you back and have an hour's free counselling session as a kind of a debrief. And thirdly, if actually it's triggered some really serious reaction from yourself, we can get somebody, a suicide counsellor, to call you and discuss further. So this is quite important support for the first aiders, just to make sure that they're being monitored and looked after. And as I say, we can pull off information for companies as well anonymously if they're interested in how much time their first aiders are spending on interactions.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. No, and I think that I have the app, had it a while ago, and it's I think it's really clever app. I think there's lots of information on there that for those individuals on the call that haven't seen it, I would encourage you to download it. It's got lots of little, bits of advice, information, toolkits that can really help everybody. So it's well worth a view. Thank you, Sarah. Laura, perhaps just turning to you, if you can sort of maybe swap hats from your large consultancy, what advice would you give to a small organisation with, say, a limited budget to improve wellbeing provision? Are there any little nuggets that you found that work well and don't cost much?
So I mean, we've heard already today about the number of resources that are available out there, accessible. But I think one of the things that we need to just be cautious about is overloading people with the too much information all at once. So I think for smaller organisations, listening to what the concerns of the workforce are, what's worrying them, and really trying to get a good understanding of how those worries are impacting them personally, but also impacting the work elements as well. And then from that, really starting to think about, and this is really where those principles of engagement came from, was to think about some simple ways to try and reduce the impact on people. But also, it's always that balance of the business and the individual, and getting that right. So it's really, to me, what's key here is the line manager engagement. We have this thing called connected conversations, which is about, it's obviously been really essential in the last 18 months. Just keeping in touch with people, and somebody said right at the beginning of today, asking how are you twice, are you okay? And really it's that time element, isn't it? Having the time to listen and understand, and respond in an appropriate way. I noticed on the Menti poll, somebody had said that rather than wellbeing promotion, it was all about engagement to them, and I'd really support that. It's about embedding things into the other business processes that really highlight wellbeing risks, I think.
Right, excellent, thanks, Laura. And Joe, I will come to you perhaps just for the last minute. I know we've overrun very slightly, and we are between everybody's lunch break, so it's quite apt that we're asking yourself. Just in terms, and I know this is a really big question, but we've talked about trying to target the SMEs. How do we get the message through? Is there anything that you have worked within the BDA that has that different approach, perhaps for targeting SME organisations, or do you have is it an issue with yourselves as well in terms of that level of communication?
It is an issue, but there are some great regional wellbeing awards that smaller SMEs can work towards, and they tend to be supported by local authorities. So I think tapping into those, they do have some limited resource, but they also have a framework that you can pick up and start with that has been built for SMEs, and it will have an element of nutrition in it, and they may have a free webinar that you can share with your workforce. So I think there are some regional, I know that there's Thrive in the West Midlands, and there's one we work with in Nottingham and one in Belfast. So there are regional programmes with support that's funded by local authorities. I think that's a great place to start. And there's certainly lots of free resources on healthy eating on the BDA website generally that anybody can download.
Yeah. Excellent. No, I think that's the point, isn't it? And it's for the construction industry to look a little bit broader rather than within. So that's excellent advice. Joe, thank you very much for that. We have run a few minutes over, but I'm going to say thank you very much to the panel. And I think I hand over to Bryony again, possibly.
You do, and I'm almost immediately handing back to Joe again, because Joe is going to be running our next wellbeing moment, which, surprise, is about food. So over to you, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks, Bryony. I'm really aware that I'm standing between you and your lunch breaks, but I've put a link in the chat, which hopefully everyone can see, just to do a really quick run through of an activity that we do on boosting productivity and focus. I talked about food and mood in the last session. This is something that can be done really quickly in teams, just to get us thinking about food and drink choices that can make us work smarter. So rather than just following it along on my screen, I'm going to ask you to, if you can, open the link, some of you, because we're going to just have a quick fire round on some of these topics. So hopefully you can see the focus model on your Padlet if you've got it open, and don't worry about switching between that and the video. So the first question, if you can, on the first column where it says F is for fluid, is to just pop in there how many drinks you've had so far today, if you can. So thinking about, we're in the middle of the day and we're aiming for 6 to 8 drinks over the day. So somebody there's had 5, that's a great start. That's super. 3, 2, 6, 4, 5, brilliant. Everyone's doing really well. 2 cups of tea, yeah, which is absolutely fine. No need to just focus on plain water. Tea and coffee is great. So some really good answers there. I can see that people, probably because we're sat at, I'm presuming, at desks, maybe 6 feet from our fridge, like lots of home workers, so lots of access to fluid. That's a really good start. It's quite a warm day today, so we're aiming for, you know, the higher level of that 6 to 8 drink recommendation. So that's super. On the next column, thinking about optimizing our nutrition intake, I just wonder if you could pop in the chat, thinking about the main food groups. You've got protein, fruit and veg, fats, carbohydrates, dairy and fluid. Is there one of those food groups that you struggle, that you think you don't eat enough of, that you're not prioritizing in your diet? Let's have a look. Let's see what else come in. Fruit. Yeah, lots of fruit and veg. Fiber, yeah, really important nutrient. Somebody there with protein. Fruit and veg and water. Veg but don't like it. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to come back to the idea of those important nutrients, because we heard earlier that eating all the range is really good for our mental and physical well-being. So we'll come back to that in a sec. C, carbohydrates. Lots of people think carbohydrates make you fat. There's a huge amount of myths about carbohydrates, but actually, you know, they're the energy blocks for us. So how many people had breakfast this morning within an hour of waking up? So if you did, pop yes. If you didn't, then pop no. Yes. Fabulous. A couple of people didn't manage it. Not everybody's a breakfast eater. In fact, there's new science that not everybody needs to start the day with breakfast, but there is a huge amount of evidence about the benefits of eating breakfast, all those lovely whole grain micronutrients that you might get from your bowl of Weetabix, and some milk that would really support your well-being, chance for a banana, those kind of things. So not everybody managed to start with breakfast today, but a lot of you did. Lots of yeses and nos. There's somebody who doesn't have breakfast, not within an hour. Yeah, lots of people are having it later in the day as well now. Okay, lunch breaks. We talked about the importance of lunch breaks. How many people managed to take a lunch break every day last week for at least 30 minutes? So no. Some good answers here, yes. Always, brilliant. Yeah, no. Lots of people saying no. Book it in the calendar, great idea. Really important. No eating at the desk, yeah. I know I'm eating into your lunch break literally now, but that idea of taking a lunch break is really valuable to refuel, refresh, reset, get outside, top up our vitamin D, and take a break. And there's a huge amount of studies that shows we are more productive for taking a lunch break. So I think breaking that culture of not taking a lunch break is something that you as leaders can really do for your employees. And then finally, snacks. Lots of people think they shouldn't snack. we've been doing a huge amount of workshops and webinars this year on mindful snacking. It's been one of the biggest issues during lockdown, people reaching for those biscuits as they're working by their fridge. Snacking can be really valuable in your diet, and I suppose just to give you a moment, I'm not going to ask you to complete this, but just to give you a moment to think about those foods that you said you think you're not getting enough of in your diet. So fruit, veg, somebody mentioned protein. Snacking can be a moment where you can really focus on those. It's a great chance to optimize your nutrient intake and make a really positive choice for your health. And I think particularly if you've got workers that have maybe high energy needs, then it can be a really valuable time to make good choices in your diet. So this was a really quick walk through our focus model. As delegates, I've got a complete version of this that can be sent out to you with lots of articles and things that you can share with your staff if you want to. So that will come out to you with a separate login and all of the anonymous responses taken out. I'm going to stop sharing now. Hopefully that was useful, and hopefully everyone now is going to head outside for a walk and a healthy lunch break. That's it from me. Bryony, I don't know if you want to wrap up.
I was on mute. I hope I'm not now. Thank you very much. That was very timely and, well, deliberately planned, it has to be said. But please go away, have a drink. As Joe has said, go out if you can, smell the air. Eddie told us all about the importance of fresh air, and just do a little shake, but try and have some lunch and be back to join us, please, if you can, at 1:15. So I'm sorry, again, we're 5 minutes over, but if you can join us again at 1:15, that'd be great. We've got some great examples of what businesses can do to support those who unfortunately are poorly in the workplace. So if you can come back at 1:15, we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much. All right. Another minute. There we go. Right. Well, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for coming back. I hope you did have time to have some lunch. I am in the very, very fortunate position of having working from home, having a husband who has retired, and he organized my lunch for me. So I had a proper balanced lunch. I had omelette and salad and water, followed by some fruit. So there we go. I've got my tick in the box for my nutrition today. Right. We're going to kick off with another little well-being moment. It's a video. It's been produced by the Lighthouse Club, but it's about one of the topics that we talked about earlier. So, Aya, if you can share that, that would be great.
Yeah, mate. Job's brilliant. It's going really well. Dry as a bone, no tea, no coffee, but listen, got to crack on. Need a favour. You know Steve? Yeah, divvy spread. I've got a horrible feeling he's not going to show next week. Can you try and sort us out a couple of lads to push the job on? Tony, you right?
How am I supposed to pay the mortgage?
What's the wife going to say? What about the kids? Got your pie from the chippy, mate? Mate, you're right. You don't seem yourself. I'm a bit worried.
Actually, no, I'm not, mate. I'm struggling financially.
Right now, our human spirit is being tested to the limit. So if you see somebody struggling, don't stand on the sidelines. Follow these 3 simple steps. Number 1, ask twice. You often get a different answer second time round. Number 2, listen, non-judgmentally. Sometimes it only needs a sympathetic ear. Number 3, always be kind. Spontaneous acts of kindness can give people a real lift, and it makes you feel good too. You could be a lifesaver today. All it takes is someone to notice and care.
There we go. It's makes you stop and think, doesn't it? So everything that we've shared today, I will be sharing with you. There will be a conference pack at the end of today. But I think that video just illustrated some of the things that we've discussed this morning, and particularly ask twice. So just a thought, please, if you're aware that somebody's struggling, ask the second time. Lovely. And now we're moving on to, I've got to find my screen. There we go. The next panel, which I am chairing. So, no, we're not. We're doing Mentimeter. I'm sorry. I'm ahead of myself. We've got another question. So, I think the Menti question should be coming up on the screen any second. There we go. So phones at the ready, or go onto another screen on your computer. It's a question about what your organisation does to support those suffering from long-term health issues. And that's something that we're going to be covering in this next panel. So the code is on the screen. If you've just joined us, you'll need to go to menti.com and either on your phone or on this open another screen on your computer and start filling in the answers. Right. Basic, nothing. That's a bit worrying. I think the question might be, in response to that, is has anybody had the conversation? Does anybody know? Is there a strategy? We're going back to those questions. Right. Okay. Well, we'll leave you to carry on asking those questions, and Menti will carry on in the background, and we'll go over to the panel now. So yes, I do want to stop you. Let's go into my slide deck. And let's move on. Oops, sorry. I hope this is mine. Yes. Great. Okay, so I'm chairing this panel looking at what can be done If you're not already offering support in the workplace, what could you do? And I'm joined by Jane, Geraldine, Madeleine and Kate. And Jane, if I can start with you, if you'd like to share with us what you think should be done in the workplace to help employees who are on long-term sick. It may be for a variety of reasons, and possibly also those that are caring for those that are on long-term sick, if you can sort of pick up on that as well.
Yeah, certainly. Hi, everybody. Lovely to be invited here to speak today. I'm here today representing British Safety Council, but as you'll see from my biography, I've worked in the health and wellbeing space for 25 odd years, so across academia, strategy, policy, and also in delivery. And it's a really interesting question, isn't it? And thinking about long-term health conditions as we have an aging working population particularly, and we are more prone to developing long-term health conditions as we age, quite naturally. And also that link between mental health and physical ill health as well. So quite often we develop what they call comorbidities. So unfortunately, once you develop one, we could also develop one or the other. And in terms of the workplace and what you could be doing, obviously, the first part really relates to that video. That's about asking and listening, really, in the first instance, listening what it's like from that individual's experience and what would help them as individuals, because we are all different. And thinking and listening to their experience, because one person with one condition might experience it in a completely different way to another. So perhaps originally thinking of people as individuals and one size doesn't fit all. Now, obviously, there's a lot of wraparound that can support that, and flexible working is the obvious option. So making sure that you have flexible working policies available and you give due consideration to the business's ability to provide flexible working, particularly around people that have to manage medical appointments for either themselves or those they're looking after. And also, you know, whether they might need to leave at certain times of the day because they have to manage their condition or again manage something. Obviously, the benefits package that you offer can make a difference. So thinking about what sort of benefits you do offer, whether that be occupational sick pay, whether it's access to occupational health, whether it's private medical insurance. There's a whole range of things that you could be considering as an organisation. But also managing any sickness absence appropriately. So again, thinking about listening, thinking about your policy. Is it around a sort of really embracing culture where people feel supported and enabled to talk about it rather than hiding the fact that they might be unwell? So training line managers to have those difficult conversations about health sometimes, but also again, going back to that, treating people as individuals. There's occupational health. I mean, the government provides access to work support, which is called the government's biggest secret. So there is funding out there for the individual as well if you need adaptations made in the workplace. And thinking about risk assessment as well. You know, do you need to do a risk assessment and find out what functional needs that individual may have, as well as the sort of other needs that they may have. And I suppose it's that focus on prevention as well, because we need to also think about how can we work with the people that we work with to provide education and support to enable them to lead healthier lives, so that they give themselves the best chance and minimise the risk of them developing long-term conditions. Now, obviously, we can't eradicate that, but doing what we can to help them stay healthy, well, both physically, emotionally, socially, is going to make a big difference to the prevalence of risk around developing long-term health conditions. So, Bryony, I hope that sort of, I've rattled through a load there, but I hope that sort of helped sort of answer the beginning of that question from my perspective.
Right, I was struggling with my mute button. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Right, thank you very much, Jane. And I'm now going to, I've got some feedback coming back, so I don't know if somebody can mute. I don't know what's going on. But I'm now going to introduce Geraldine from Balfour Beatty, who's going to share her thoughts with us. Thank you, Geraldine.
Thank you, Bryony. So hello everybody, it's really good to be at this event. My name is Geraldine Branner, I'm the Associate Director of Health for Balfour Beatty. So my remit is managing occupational health and hygiene across Balfour Beatty UK. So I'm an occupational health specialist by background, so I've been asked along here today to give an occupational health perspective really. So my OH experience spans around 20 years, unfortunately for me, exclamation mark. I joined Balfour Beatty about 4 years ago, and actually it was a baptism of fire because occupational health in construction is extremely different in NHS and in emergency services where I've previously worked. So it was an exciting journey over the last 4 years I've certainly had. And what I have learned while I have been in Balfour Beatty is the thread of health goes through every part of the organisation. And it's really important. It is not a silo. And you know, I've worked with some fantastic colleagues since I've been in Balfour Beatty, from property to IT, procurement, environment and sustainability, employee engagement, and they're all really interested in health and really want to be engaged. We have got such a breadth of roles across the huge business that we have, and it's a really exciting opportunity to be part of that in terms of health. So with regards to this question, which is obviously very dear to my heart, offering long-term help for health issues. I think we've touched on it hugely in the last couple of hours with regards to having honest conversations, but really having those conversations with the line manager. So the line manager is key, and I do feel like that it has been, again, a very common thread going through these discussions. So the line manager providing support to that employee is so key. But I think often our line managers are a bit scared, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know how to support an employee with a long-term health condition, whether it is physical or mental. And I think sometimes what they do is do nothing because they are scared of doing something wrong. So that actually the inactivity then causes a further rift between them and the employee. So it's really important that our line managers are upskilled. So within Balfour Beatty, we have what we call a Balfour Beatty Academy, which is there to train all of us across the whole business. You know, there's up to 15,000 staff at any one time. So any one of us can join the Balfour Beatty Academy and look at the information on there and upskill ourselves. But in particular to this, there is workshops on comm skills, having honest conversation workshops, effective return to work meeting, a guide for managers toolkits, and there's actually a separate managing absence course for our individual managers. And within this, it talks about having OH involvement, understanding the legislation, supportive conversations, what they look like. And it does give sort of tips and hints about what you might do. Because what I think managers want is tangible advice. They want tips about what they can physically do to support somebody. Otherwise, they often just err on the side of caution and don't say anything sometimes. I think it's important for the managers to know they need to upskill themselves, but also for the employee to know that the communication between the two is a two-way street. It's not just they'll just sit there and be done to. It is really important to have that two-way street with them and the line manager. A timely occupational health referral is really important with regards to supporting people with long-term health conditions. So yeah, obviously this is dear to my heart, but it's really important that you are supported in making a good quality referral to occupational health, and then you will get a good quality clinical report back. And often I've seen referrals from managers that have been too lengthy, so they've asked like 20 questions of the clinician, and you can normally get a really good report from just 4 or 5 questions. You can get the answers you need from just 4 or 5 questions about reasonable adjustments, about what support that person may need to get back into the workplace. So if we're asking any more than 4 or 5 questions of our OH providers or OH service, we probably need to really look again at our OH report. And you can get support from HR on completing your OH referral. we in Balfour Beatty have obviously a sickness absence policy, but we also have a reasonable adjustments policy. So it's really important that managers understand what reasonable adjustments are, the legislation around it. HR can support them with that. But we're now introducing a reasonable adjustments passport, so that if an employee has a long-term health condition and has reasonable adjustments being put into place, that then follows them around. So that if they join a new site or change departments, they don't have to go through the whole process again with the new manager. This passport, they will then follow them around and hopefully make the whole process a little bit easier. We also have affinity networks across our business, and one of those is the Ability Network, which basically is hoping to break down barriers about accessibility, understanding of mental health conditions, raising awareness across the whole organisation in terms of diversity and inclusion, and making sure that we're looking at the broad spectrum of diversity and inclusion, which would include chronic ill health. I know Jane mentioned Access to Work scheme, and I do agree that it's a very, very good kept secret, but I would urge you to get on the government website and look at Access to Work scheme, because it does, if you're in employment, it does allow, and you've got a disability or a long-term health condition, it can give you a grant to help with special equipment you might need, or travel to and from work, or software that you might need to help you, support you in your role and to keep you in that job. So really do take a look at that, and again, work with your HR on that system. We also have a neurodiversity network as well, which is really trying to bring to life what the understanding of dyslexia, autism, and all other neurodiverse issues amongst our business, because we do have people within our business that do have these conditions and are very successful at work. And what do we do to make sure that they're supported? We've introduced recently smart working, mainly on the back of the pandemic, but actually that gives employees more choice than ever with regards to start and work times, staggering things, you know, having good discussions with their line manager, and that has been a really successful thing going forward, and I think that will only develop going forward from our business. We've also introduced the health and wellbeing strategy, and of which it has a health maturity matrix, and helping people, or helping the business across the business to grow in terms of well-being. And it's trying to bring to life what good looks like, because again, I go to the beginning of my talk, you know, often managers don't know what good looks like, and we're trying to show them, give an example of what good might look like in terms of supporting employees in the well-being space as well. And also within Balfour Beatty, we really do encourage employees to set up their own support groups, and we're really supportive of that. So we've had a menopause working group, eating disorders working group. So people do employee supporting employee, and we really do encourage that. And we have lots of email traffic on our internal networks talking about these things and supporting them, and I think that has been really successful, and some people find that really supportive to help support their long-term conditions. So I think that's from me, or okay from me, Bryony, for the moment, but I'm happy to join the rest of the conversation when the panel goes on. Back to you, Bryony. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Geraldine. I am actually going to break with what I said at the beginning of the session this morning, if the panelist session. I'm actually going to go to Kate first, because I will explain later why. But Kate, if you can join us now, that would be great.
Thank you, Bryony. Thank you everyone for being here and yeah, taking the time to have these conversations. I think having listened to everything today, I think it's also a time to congratulate how far people have come and how organisations are doing both all that we've heard today, and I'm sure many others. I think it's something that isn't often stopped, but actually the movement for wellbeing and the changes that have been made for people in organisations is really taking momentum. And I think there's a time to stop and appreciate and congratulate yourselves on what has been achieved. In terms of long-term health conditions, I'm going to share slides, although there's not many. I say, oh, there it is. To really, I think I'm not in quite order. Hang on a second. Technology is not my forte. Diabetes is. There we go. Can we see those? No one shouts at me. Oh, perfect. So from my background, I've come into industry with diabetes safety and awareness. And as a long-term health condition, it's something that impacts 4.6 million people in the UK, 1 million are undiagnosed. And you can see by the image, there's 700 people a day diagnosed with diabetes in the UK. It's something that many people know about and often isn't really communicated or talked about, or just they know somebody who is. It's one of those conditions, but it's one of those, like the mental health, that can creep up. It has lots of complexities. It's the largest cause of blindness in the working population. Leading to 75% of men who have diabetes have erectile dysfunction, and there's 170 amputations a week in the UK from the condition. And they're just top line stats. We have far too many thrown at us, but how do we really help people in work, both all the stuff that's been talked about, from presenteeism to absenteeism to the risks associated from diabetes? So for some people who aren't well managed on insulin, there are risks of blacking out. There are DVLA regulations in place. So we cross the boundary in terms of health and safety around diabetes when we're at the top end and things aren't managed in the right manner. And I think it's really important that we bring to light these sorts of facts of how do we help people come forward. I've done a lot of work pre-COVID, working particularly on construction sites, talking in the sheds to largely gentlemen, but ladies as well. Erectile dysfunction always gets a good conversation going, but how do we communicate the risks and that actually organisations are there to support? One of the things that came out a lot was fear of losing their jobs. If they come forward, they don't know if they find they have diabetes, that if actually will they be able to still continue to do their job, will they be able to drive? Now, as managers, and a lot of stuff that's been said, I think it's clearly known that this is okay, but is this filtering down, and are we getting this message out so they feel they can come forward? As I just said, I think there's huge steps forward in this, particularly around mental health, and it is helping people. And that's been the highlight of today. I think that's a great thing, but can we aid that with awareness campaigns and posters to give people the reason to come forward? I think as well, there is still, certainly around diabetes, and we've seen in mental health, there's still a stigma attached to the condition. The NHS very much link it to obesity. We know there is a correlation, but there's lots of other factors, shift patterns and all sorts. And I think people are quite nervous to come forward from the stigma that can be associated. And as an organisation, that's something we're really trying to break down and show other factors and get, like with the mental health, get the conversation going. There's some great bands for people who are working on sites that say, I'm not drunk, it's diabetes. You know, how do we help people? Have we got the right hypo kits and sugars available? And if we had those, would there be more openness to that coming forward? So I think it leads into everything that's been said today, really. And I won't go on about it because I can get overly passionate about diabetes, but just really to highlight that as one of the long-term health conditions and the complexities that come with it, are we getting in early on the intervention and on the support and increasing that ability to have the conversation? One of the things we've recently done actually is worked with the British Safety Council and partnered with them under their Being Well Together. I know that someone's already spoken on their behalf, but just wanted to share in terms of what they've got, quite a lot of very useful guides for employers and employees around some of the long-term health conditions and well-being that are there for use, should you need them, both the small organisations and the larger ones. So I just wanted to highlight that really. I think it's come out, obviously there's so much information around well-being and it's picking and choosing how do you fit it into a campaign. Last week was Diabetes Awareness Week. We did a lot of work around that and I know lots of organisations did get involved. So how do we keep going with all the other elements that have been spoken about today and fit it all in and then tie it together? As I've talked about from the British Dietetics Association, you know, well-being or food is often one that comes up. And I think there's been some great conversations, but for me, I like the one less challenge. I'm hugely passionate about it. You know, if we could encourage someone to have one less sugar in a coffee today, and some of you had 6 or 7, I saw it on the survey. If you have a sugar in each of those, if you just had one less, that would be 1 kilogram less a month. That would be 12 kilograms less a year, whether that's pints, whether that's wine, whether it's cans of pop or crisps. Just bringing one less down a day or however often, as you can see in this, would make a big difference. And we're very passionate at trying to raise this one less challenge across industry and anywhere who wants to pick it up, really, to help with the well-being that everybody's speaking so well about today. So I think that's my short share. Stop sharing. Bryony, again, with everyone else, happy to join in with questions that come around diabetes or any long-term condition, how we can continue to improve and help people.
Lovely, thanks very much. And as I said, I've reordered things because Madeleine has a particular story about being on the receiving end of support. So Madeleine, if you'd like to join us, and you can tell us about your experience and therefore what you think employers can do or should do to support.
Thank you, Bryony, and it's lovely to join you all. So yes, I'm Madeleine Bridson. I'm a commercial director at Arcadis, but I'm here to give my perspective as someone who's suffered from a long-term health issue. And it's the first time I've spoken about my illness publicly. So I'm going to be bringing my own personal learning, both as a leader and as somebody who's been through it, based upon the strategies that our business had in place for me. I think, unfortunately, my story also shows that things will happen to you no matter what interventions you have put in place. So we always have to bear in mind that sometimes things will just happen. But my background, I'm a chartered quantity surveyor. I was sponsored at university, so I began working as a contractors QS with Bovis in the 1990s and had 10 years with them, and then joined EC Harris in 2003, who became Arcadis. I was a project surveyor, worked my way through our business and spent all my time out on client sites. So with Stansted to begin with, then over at Heathrow on Terminals 5 and 2, Jaguar Land Rover and TfL, and latterly on the Northern Line extension in London. So major client programs. We know the nature of our projects that we work on in the construction industry, always deadlines, always stress. But it was on the Northern Line extension in the project offices on a Friday afternoon in November 2017. I had a phone call from my GP who said to me that I probably had bowel cancer. I was 43, my girls were 9 and 7. Up until that point, I'd been in good health. I didn't smoke, I exercised, I was a vegetarian for 20 years. I didn't drink excessively, and there was no family history of any kind of cancer. So my only symptom had been some heart palpitations that I'd had a couple of weekends before that I couldn't explain and hadn't gone away. So I'd gone to see my GP and I'd had some routine bloods, and that phone call came the following afternoon, and they were obviously very keen to get me into the hospital system. The heart palpitations had been caused by what turned out to be severe anemia, which is down to internal bleeding. So in fairness to my GP, she did absolutely nail it. And I left the office that afternoon and I didn't come back to work for 2.5 years. And I refer to that day as one of the trapdoors of life that we all can fall through. And you can be trolling along quite happily, just living family life at work, and then all of a sudden, boom, everything's gone from beneath you. And it may not just happen to us. I mean, often we'll support a close colleague or a friend or a member of our own family through this. And I think we need to bear that in mind when we talk about well-being as well. That is also very much about looking after people who are affected in some way by serious illness. At the point of my diagnosis, my husband and I agreed I probably wouldn't work again. So I think, and it did turn out to be a stage 3 cancer, so it was a pretty serious one as well. And thanks to Sophia this morning for reminding me about my statistics. So I've made a mental note to bear those in mind, because at the moment I'm 3.5 years into my 5-year follow-up programme. But the fact that I'm back in the senior director role, so not just a small role in Arcadis, and I'm sitting talking to you guys as well, thinking, is this well-being? But yeah, actually it's a way of helping other people who are going through the situation that I've been through. And it was down to some very simple strategies that Arcadis had in place actually for me. And life wasn't perfect during that time. I had downs, there were a couple of howlers, but it was due to the overwhelming positive support from my business, led right from the top downwards, that kept me part of our business. They refused to let me move away, if you like, and I'm back, and I've promised myself that I'll be back for as long as I continue to love my job, and that I can deal with inevitable stresses that come with our jobs. For me, it's very important about understanding the impact of my own role upon my emotional, my mental and my physical well-being, which I suddenly, thanks to some counselling as I came back to work, realised are all linked. So I would say very quickly from my points of learning, and then we'll obviously answer questions too. But for me, I had a single point of contact. In my case, it was my line manager. He lives locally, which helped for him. It doesn't have to be a line manager, I don't think. It can be somebody within the team. It could be a team leader. We use team leaders at Arcadis. They're responsible very much for wellbeing, communications, and our people development. They're generally people who have natural people leadership skills and attributes, a strong and emotional empathy, and they can be particularly good for this type of circumstance or situation. It needs to be the right person. They need to get on with the person who's ill. They need to be prepared to understand what's going on. They need to be able to filter communications. I need to be protected from the pressures of work. It was very, well, I wasn't interested in work. At the point of a diagnosis like that, everything's stripped away. The last thing you want to worry about are your emails or whether or not anybody can find a file in the office. But equally, it's important that they can filter messages of support. It's nice to have that contact. They also need to be able to ask the right questions and be prepared to do their own research too. Cancer is certainly not all the same. Everybody has different experiences of it, different experiences of treatment. There are different side effects to all of the treatments. Don't make assumptions, just find out. I, for one, spent a lot of time explaining to people that I didn't lose my hair from my chemo, for example. Not all people need chemo. It depends upon the stages of your cancer and how far it's progressed. My line manager was particularly good for messaging me and taking me out to lunch. That did help, even on the occasion that he forgot his wallet. He was also good for giving everybody else updates. It's nice to get messages from people, but often you're not in a position where you really want to be messaging everybody back with the same messages. That point of contact is great for that. You don't particularly appreciate messages from people saying, well, I was worrying because you didn't get back to my text. It's also important to bear in mind, I mean, whereas my reaction was that I just wanted to drop work and just focus on my family, my treatment and my recovery, some people want to carry on working, and it's really important to understand how to do that and how to be flexible. And this is where wellbeing policies may not have one size that can fit all. It's also really important to understand that you need to support that point of contact, whether it's a line manager or someone else. It's extremely stressful if you're supporting somebody who's very ill. It's a real emotional burden. For me, there was no pressure to return to work. It took me a long time to recover from my treatment. Arcadis were wonderful. I offered to resign when my chemotherapy ended because I just said to them I just could not consider being back at work again, and they were wonderful. They just said, just stay sick, stay with us. They just kept that contact, kept that support. I'd say the little things make a massive difference. I had a call from our CEO who again asked my line manager if he could contact me. Mark looks after 4,000 people in the UK, but he wanted to reach out to me. And that call that afternoon made an enormous difference to me. Just he leads wellbeing for our business from the top. And it was a standout moment during that awful time that just kept my connection to our business. And I thanked Mark personally for that when I returned last year. And people remembering milestones and sending messages when you've got big tests coming up. I was forever in and out of the scanners. Just getting the messages saying, thinking of you today made a huge difference. And our team PA also lived locally and used to turn up with little boxes of chocolate and a nice bar of soap. Makes a big difference. Here's the do nots. They stand out. I hate to say it, but as a patient, where somebody who's going through this, you do notice. General emails, awful. You haven't done this. You haven't completed your timesheet. You haven't filled in this specific health and safety KPI. I would say this is particularly for large businesses, but also for small. If you've got general systems that pump out reports saying somebody hasn't done something, it's quite important to check those lists against people who are off sick. because they don't want to be receiving an email telling them that they haven't recorded a health and safety observation, ironically, that month. I also had a classic comment from somebody within my wider leadership team who had told my line manager, I'd get in touch and see how she is, but I don't really know her. And I thought, rubbish excuse. If you're in leadership, don't be silent. Don't rely on others. Do what you need to do. Being a leader is difficult. Sometimes you have to do difficult things that feel quite hard for you, but that's what makes the difference between a good leader and a poor leader. Also, don't ask the person who's ill for sponsorship because you're running a marathon or something for cancer. It's bad enough going through it. You don't really want to be sponsoring people for it. Coming back to work, I couldn't even remember my own work phone number. Onboarding people again, bearing all of this in mind is really important. Be gentle with them. I know there were some concerns. I was lucky enough that the business had an insurance policy that they were able to draw upon for me to support me financially, but insurance companies are extremely stressful. Keep on top of the requirements of your policies and the communications around that, and try and protect the person affected as much as possible, or just be gentle with them in terms of checkups and filling in forms. I had 9 months of a phased return to work, and I'd accrued annual leave during that absence, and that made a huge difference for me because I was able to work out which working patterns worked well for me, and it allowed me to make long-term decisions then about the best way to return to work flexibly and how I could work part-time and still do my job well. I would just say I'm probably overrunning, Bryony, so I will finish there, but I would just say have an interest in your people. As leaders, be interested in them, remind everyone to look after themselves, provide the right support for all of them, but also be prepared to lead by example. So if you're telling everybody to look after themselves, show them that you're doing that. Take your lunch breaks, exercise when you say you're going to, log off at a reasonable time of the day. I would really say live your values, and also is a question I ask myself now as I've come back to my role, is actually what legacy will you leave when you've left your business behind as well. Thank you, Bryony.
Thank you very much, Madeleine. You can see why I left it till last. I think that's a very powerful message. I think there's a lot that we can take away from that, be us large organisations or small organisations. I'd just like to go back to the Menti question, if we can see some of the responses. There weren't very many, it has to be said, when I last looked at it. So let's have a look and see what comes up. And then, oh, a few more. Good, a few more. And then I'd like to invite the panel back to have a look and comment. But what I'm particularly interested in is, I'm aware that today we've spoken to a lot to people from large organizations. And it's often said that things are different in a smaller organization, but I'm very keen to get across that actually leadership is leadership, whether you're in a large organization or a small organization. And I'd just like to go back to everybody to say, if you had a message for any leader, what would it about supporting people in the workplace who are suffering health issues? They don't necessarily need to be off sick, but they may be having health issues. What would it be? So Geraldine, you seem to have come on. Your camera is on, so I'm hitting you first. But if everybody else wants to come on, I think we're taking this in Madeleine, because she's given us a whole list of things that we should and shouldn't be doing. But I'd just like to have your comments, Geraldine, and then Jane, and then Kate. Thank you.
Can I just say, Madeleine, thank you very much for that really honest, as a clinician myself, a really honest feedback, and it was really, really powerful. So thank you so much. You know, it was extremely valuable and quite moving. So, and it's lovely to see you looking so well. Not that I've met you before, but you look fantastically well. So well done. I think I'm really passionate about behaviours and communication. I know that's it sounds so boring, but actually, if we are as leaders doing the right behaviours and really looking at and you know, we in Balfour BT we've got behaviours and values, of course, as you'd have, and actually we're very strong on that in our PDRs. And do you stick to your behaviours and values? But I wonder how many of us just look those and don't actually look at what the behaviours and values are, and if we are walking the walk, and really making sure that we are living by that. Because you know, it is difficult being a leader, it's difficult being a manager, there's huge amounts put on us, and you know, we can be stressed ourselves. But actually, if we are constantly having to making sure that we are treating others how we'd like to be treated ourselves, of course, but actually what is the best thing for that person, and having that real personal element to you, and looking at those behaviours, with it being inclusive within your team. I think it could just really be transformational, and it sounds so simple, but it is so true.
Thank you. Jane, do you want to come in there? You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. So all of those things, I would say. I think if I was talking to leaders, picking up what was said earlier, really, that interest in people, treating people as individuals, thinking about how your behaviours and your attitudes might affect other individuals. And if you do feel overwhelmed, make sure you seek support too, because having worked for Dame Carol Black for a number of years and hearing her talk about the importance of line managers, I totally get it. But also those individuals, you know, they are people too, and they have a really tricky job sometimes. So if they are feeling overwhelmed, to seek out support, but also make sure that they do the proper training and take the opportunities to learn and develop themselves as individuals, and be aware of what's on offer. But just thinking about going back to that, really be interested in people as individuals and listen to their needs before making assumptions about what they need.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And Kate?
I think it's a bit of a tough one going on the last on this one.
Yeah,
I think the key points.
I'm sorry.
It's fair enough. I think all the key points have been really well highlighted, and you know, Madeline, again, thank you for sharing. I think that really, when it comes from the heart and is so openly shared like that, I think we learn so much more. But really, I suppose that to follow on with what's been said, it's leaders been able to make themselves available so people feel they can talk. It's that touching on, isn't it, where no matter what position that person feels, they can come and speak to them. There's that open door, and as everyone said, they're approachable with a kindness, and they're going to listen and not judge. I think that's the key part. People don't want to be judged, do they? And I think if we can continue to build the environment that's being done, it will only grow into that ability for people to have the space to talk.
Lovely, thanks. And Madeleine, it's a slightly different question, I suppose, for you, and that is, I suppose it's about the sharing with your colleagues. And you mentioned learning about different conditions. How important do you think it is that to share and to be open and honest? People are so concerned about offending, and so often it might be about illness, or it might be about race, or it might be about a whole host of things where we're frightened of saying the wrong thing. What do you think leaders or colleagues can do about that?
It's very difficult, isn't it? And I think it's important to read body language and look at the way your questions are answered. I was always very open about my illness. I didn't mind people knowing. Because I knew messages of support would help me too. I think if questioning is gentle, and again, you just read the signs, it's fine to ask, and to try not to make assumptions. I say cancer particularly is very difficult, but one of my GPs said to me, they think with medicine, it's much more of an art than a science. I mean, we're all so different. Unfortunately, I do feel, which isn't always reassuring when you're having cancer treatment, actually. Sometimes you want to know that there's a textbook for all of this, but the reality there isn't. I'd also say there is a way of asking twice. I mean, I know we talk about asking twice when somebody's under pressure. For me, I get asked a lot how I am, which I don't mind, but there are different ways of asking someone how they are. You can ask how someone is, and if they say, yeah, I'm fine, actually, yes, it's okay. And then I will have people who will say, but how are you? And I think, no, you're just asking me for almost own, not entertainment, but just because to satisfy your own need for knowledge. You're not asking me because you're genuinely interested in how I am or for my welfare. And I say it's a difficult line. It's a really difficult line. I think the very minimum you can do is, if you're not comfortable and you feel that you don't know the person that well, you can still just say, I'm really sorry to hear that you're having a hard time at the moment, and I'm thinking of you. And you can leave it as simply as that.
Yeah.
Bryony, can I just come in there as well? Sorry to.
Yes, do.
I think it's really important to almost have a verbal contract as a manager with your employee. So ask them the level of communication they want to have. And in my many years, unfortunately, of occupational health experience, the successful return to work was when the communication was really good, but it was on their terms. You know, if it's like once every 6 months, it might not be palatable to the line manager. But actually, if it's once a week, it's once every 2 weeks. Or and what do you want it to be? Do you want me to? Are you happy with this? So it's having that contract with them verbally and getting their understanding and their buy-in at the early stage can and then you're not going to be treading on eggshells, and the employee knows what to expect. So I think it's really important to have those early conversations.
Thank you, Geraldine. You said that so much better than I possibly could have done. I was about to say something like that, but you actually put the proper professional hat on that and came out with exactly the right thing. So thank you very much. I was actually
Bryony, could I add something in as well? Because a lot of the work that I do is focused on small and medium businesses, both in terms of research and policy development. And I know leaders are just leaders, but sometimes if you're running a small business, this really can feel quite overwhelming because you don't have access to HR support, you don't have occupational health, you don't have a benefits package, and you probably had no training in the people management and can't afford the time and resource to do that. So I just want to say, I don't know what the split is of the people that are joining this, but if you are a small business, there are some steps you can do too. And it's really about treating people as people. I just don't want this to feel too overwhelming if you haven't got this whole wealth of structure and support around you as a small business.
I think I must be sending thought processes down the wires, because I was literally just about to go on to that and ask what, because yeah, you're right. I mean, certainly when those registered, it was a good split between large organizations, small organizations and medium-sized organizations, and they won't have those those people in place. But you know, whatever can be done to support. And I was then going to go on to, in actual fact, access to work. I know about access to work. I've put the link in the chat, but perhaps somebody would like to pick that up and explain what it is and what is on offer, because it is those small businesses that very, very rarely hear about access to work. I have to hold my hands up. The first time I heard about it was when Lord Blunkett spoke at an Inspiring Change conference and told us that it was the House of Commons hadn't really heard about it either. So
no, I mean, I worked in government for the Work and Health Unit for a number of years, and we always did call it our best kept secret. No matter how much it was publicised, people just didn't seem to pick up on it. But it is a grant that's available to an individual. I can't remember the maximum figure now. I think it's up to something like £32,000 to help them with either reasonable adjustments or, you know, flexible ways to get into work. It could provide taxi service or all sorts of manner of things that the employer and the employee can work together to actually get access to that money to make the job more accessible for everybody, so that people can operate with parity, and it makes the job easier for them, and it removes barriers, basically.
Lovely, thank you.
I mean, the Being Well Together program that BSc has got loads of guides, which includes information about access to work as well.
Right, okay. We are just about on time. Kate, we haven't heard back from you, and Madeleine, if you want to pop in and say whatever is still on your mind, please do. Kate, have you got any thoughts you want to add?
I think a lot has been covered. It feels like a little bit of get out of clause, but I think a load has been covered, whether it's the large organisations through to the small, and it comes back each time to making that ability to have people come and speak. And I think, you know, from the work that we're doing, I feel when we work at ground level, which is where my passion lies, we've still got that need to help people come forward, realise certainly around the diabetes that their jobs aren't going to be lost. I think when I'm on the ground having those conversations, having come into organisations, that's the area I still feel that needs to be helped. And I don't think it's always just about the line managers, it's about allowing people, the communication to come through, to allow workers to realize they can speak to their line manager, that there's not going to be a problem. You know, I think a lot's come out about line managers, and I think they're doing a wonderful job. We can always do more. But actually, when I do present in the tin shed, as I call it, and share that their jobs are safe and come in as a third party because I'm not part of the organisation, there suddenly is an understanding that this is okay, adjustments can be made, they won't lose their jobs. And how do we continue to have that conversation? And sometimes third parties can be good at that because it doesn't feel like the company are telling them. And I think, you know, when you show them that, it gives a new perspective of what can be done, and we can engage with them, and then they can feel they can go to line manager. We've certainly had people come after talks and said to us, we've told the line manager we've actually gone and had our test for diabetes, we do know we've got it, I have come forward, I thought I was going to lose my job. And I think these are some of the other conversations coming from a different angle, not just line management, and work that can continue to be done like that's been done with mental health. So I think these are areas we can continue in. And I mentioned erectile dysfunction earlier, and that is certainly a conversation that gets interest and allows the conversation to open up in maybe a different way, and not what was expected from a talk. And then you can open them, and we've found we've had more open and honest conversations from that. So I think, you know, line managers is fantastic, but if we can come both ways, I think we'll move further forward faster.
Lovely, thank you. Madeleine, have you got anything you want to add?
I think just thinking about small and medium-sized businesses, it's worth understanding that you're probably going to be part of a wider support network beyond work itself, if that makes sense. And I think understanding that can then allow you to adapt to the support that you're providing as an employer and as that organisation. And certainly I was a volunteer at Scouts and still am, and also through my church community. And one of my friends who I do Scouts with this week said to me, I'm really sorry I didn't come and see you in hospital. And I said to her, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because actually I was getting that support from other areas at that time. I mean, you will find that people just pick up generally right across your life and hold you up during those really dark days, and saying it's definitely something to bear in mind. Some people will need more support than others, and it's just about making it personal as you can.
Lovely, lovely, thank you. Well, we are absolutely bang on time, so I don't think it's down to my chairmanship, I have to say. But I am conscious that people do need to get away. Thank you all very much for participating on my panel. I've learnt a lot all throughout today, but I'd particularly like to say thank you to Madeleine, because that was a very personal and powerful story, and thank you for sharing it with us. I could tell at times there was some emotion in your voice, and it's just wonderful that you've felt able to share it with us, and it's good that there's a positive story coming from it as well. So thank you very much, everybody. And now I have to switch over and put on a different hat and do a well-being moment myself. So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, now it's back to a little bit of audience participation on this. I've got to share my screen and I've got to find my right slide, and I've got 2 slides open. I hope I'm going to go to the right one. Is it going to do? It's not moving. Right, okay. Now this is for everybody to do. I want you to just have a little bit of chill time and just think carefully and quietly. You can write things down if you want, but I'd just like you just to take a little stock of yourself today. So start to think about writing down 5 things you can see. I'll give you a few minutes. I hope there's a plant in the room. I hope there's a picture on the wall. I have to say, my room, the room that I'm sitting in, is a complete mess in the direction that I'm looking, because I had to clear everything from behind me. 5 things you can see. 4 things you can hear. It might be a bit more challenging for me because I've locked myself away in a room which it's quite quiet. So 4 things you can hear. A little bit easier. 3 things you can touch. I've got a glass of water sitting in front of me, so I've been able to touch that at various times during today. 2 things you can taste. I've just had my lunch. I hope you've all had. And then finally, just 1 thing you're grateful for. I'm not going to ask you to share any of those things, but there's an awful lot of research behind this. Very simple little exercise that says that this can help slow you down, stop anxiety, and just ground you again. So it's just this very simple little thing that you can all do. And now, I don't think we are opening Mentimeter. Now I'm going to invite Peter back to join me. And between the 2 of us, are you there, Peter?
I'm here.
Ah, he's there.
That's right. I was just drifting off in peace and quiet, following that.
Drifting in peace and quiet, right.
You woke me up by saying, can you help me out?
Oh dear. Well, you won't have experienced it, but we used to do things like that when I used, which is a very long time ago, when I used to go to, well, family classes, let's put it like that. So we used to do the drift off to sleep, lie down and drift off to sleep and think about all these different things. So anyway, right. Well, we've had some fantastic speakers, haven't we, today? We've learnt, I know I've learnt masses. I know you're more of an expert in this field than I am, but I suspect that you have also learnt quite a lot today.
Yeah, well, I'm just happy to give a bit of feedback from my perspective, Bryony. I'll be very brief, but I'd just like to reflect on both the 2 really powerful personal stories that we've had, both from Ashley and Madeline. I think they've given the conference a real focus, and I just think, wish you both well for the future. I think it was just so powerful. We ought to be really grateful for that. And with that, we've heard also a huge number of other topics and initiatives to help with prevention of poor well-being. And for me, I think the key areas, and just picking up the common themes, I've just been writing notes madly like I usually do and trying to pick out a few points. Communication is one that occurs pretty regularly. But it's communication of what? You know, there's the messages through the supply chain, and we've heard a huge amount of how we actually advise and reach out to the supply chain. The communication of risks, because obviously that's what we're all trying to avoid. And then also the communication of good practice. And there are no simple answers to these. It's just that it's interesting that industry is discussing them, and hopefully in due course we can really try and help move them on. I think also we've talked about line managers and supervisors and leadership extensively. And I think also line managers and supervisors are vital. And I think sometimes they don't actually appreciate the position of influence that they're in, particularly when it's easy enough to have a conversation with somebody. And I think you've also said leadership, lead by example, set a good example first, and then and lead by it. And actually, we're all leaders. We're all responsible for our own health and safety and well-being. But the big question for me, and I think we've talked about it extensively, is how do we influence the SME organisations and those people who don't have the support of those bigger organisations? It's a big question, and again, there's no simple answer. But I think really we have touched on it. If you try and find something which is realistic, something which is manageable for your own sized organisation. So don't bite off too much, like do it in a bite-sized way. Even if you just go out and buy a plant and stick it in front of your desk, then I'm sure Eddie will be pleased, and it might improve the quality of the air. But if you are a bigger organisation, I certainly would recommend the survey that Laura did for her organisation, because it monetised the issue. And I know, you know, monetary shouldn't really be part of it, but quite often to make these initiatives work, we do work and live in a commercial environment. So why not actually try and put some money to it? And then that should hopefully influence your board to actually make the investments that are needed. So I think really that's it from my angle, Brian. I'm sure there are lots of others, but those were just interesting snippets for me.
Yep, I'd just like to go to the final Menti question. If Sarah can share it. We've just got one more Menti question before we ask, or we have questions from any other questions from the floor. Yeah, how likely are you to review your wellbeing practices and processes after today's conference? This is looking very positive. This is good. Great. Well, I'll leave you to carry on responding to that. For me, what came across most strongly, in the words of Tony Blair, was education, education, education. I'm pretty sure it was him that said that. I think that we talked a lot about, or we talked on a number of occasions about how do we get the message down to those people. We might have the best initiatives in the world, but unless we're getting those messages right through the organization. So I think for me, the message is think about how you can educate, think about those conversations. It might be it might just be a conversation. It might be a toolbox talk. It might be inviting one of the speakers that we've heard today to contact you and carry out some sort of training or just have a conversation. But that's what we've got to do. And we've got to look at those different means of getting those messages down there, whether it's about diabetes, whether it's about cancer, whether it's about mental health. We have done an awful lot about mental health over the last few years. It's certainly gone way up the scale of things that were being discussed. And it was interesting to note right at the very beginning with Rachel's slides that was probably the number one topic. But I hope we've shown you today that there are so many other aspects to health and well-being, and they all need to be considered. I started my thoughts on starting this conference, putting together this conference, was that I wanted to showcase as much as I possibly could. I could have showcased so much more. I could have had probably 2 days of a conference, possibly even 3 days of a conference. There is so much there. There is so much good practice going on. And if you've learned something today and you take away just one little nugget, I will think that I have succeeded in passing on some knowledge. I think that we need to definitely think about our communication strategies. It's not just thinking about well-being strategies. And when I say strategy, I don't necessarily mean that everything has to be written down. Small companies don't have time to write everything down. But it does just show that there are things that we need to think about. We need to just have those quiet moments of chat. We saw in the lighthouse video how the guy, he was on the phone and he wasn't quite engaged with his Oppo, with his support. And then he suddenly realized something was wrong. And it's a very powerful message. He then went and made a point of having a conversation. So think about how you can have those conversations. It's not so easy when we're all stuck on screens at the moment, or so many of us are stuck on screens at the moment. But again, you know, just pick up that phone or do whatever. But we do need to get better at communicating and just noticing those things. I'm sure, sadly, that many of us will know people who have had cancer. Many of us will know people who have taken their own life. I certainly, sadly, I've been working in construction for a very long time, and sadly, I do know a few people who have taken their own life. And you always ask yourself, could you have done more? I used to sit opposite somebody, and he and I worked incredibly closely for very many years, and sadly, he retired. And within days of retiring, he took his own life. I had no idea at the time that he used to have his dark days. I had no idea. And I keep thinking, even today, and this is 3 years on, could I have noticed? Should I have noticed? I didn't, and I regret that. So it is just about having those conversations. I don't need to dwell on it too much, but they are just so important. Policies and procedures are great, and they do have a place, and they do help put some structure around doing the right thing. But it's those conversations that are really, really important. So I'd like to invite you to reflect on that. There is a feedback form. If you have any comments or any thoughts on what you've learned today, if you think we've missed something, I'd be very grateful to hear about it. I think, I don't know whether I have a slide. If there's more that you want to learn, as I said at the beginning, I lead on the Fairness, Inclusion and Respect program, which is free to access for anybody working in construction. There are a series of resources, there's workshops, there are e-learning tools, there are all sorts of things, and a lot of it is around well-being. Not all of it. A lot of it is about inclusivity and making sure that we are respectful to one another. And there's stuff about flexible working. There's a whole host of stuff, inclusive leadership, etc. Please go and have a look at those resources if you're not aware of it. we'd like you to access them. They're free. They've been supported by the CITB for very many years. And we are always developing tools. So if there's any thoughts about anything that we're missing, then please let me know, either through your feedback form or just, you've got my email address, so just get in touch with me. And on that, I think I might even be able to give you back 4 minutes. There don't seem to be any questions in the chat, in the Q&A session. So thank you very much, everybody, for participating. Thank you especially to the panelists and to Peter. And stay safe, stay well, and good luck. Thanks very much.